morning, everybody. My name is Dan, and I am with Team Treebeard today to talk about our sustainability initiative here at BC. And we have contributions today from Kevin T, who is now a part of our team that helped us tremendously on this project.
I'm Jill. I'm Maeve. And I'm Nicole Huey, and it is our privilege to present these today.
Nicole, I have.
Oh, you have a clicker. Okay. All right. So today our goal is to look at specifically the zero waste policy that was presented to us in the sustainability pamphlet. And what we will be doing is we will be replacing the overall trash that's produced at Gamedays with a more sustainable and BC-friendly product. Using our certain strategy called nudge theory, we will be using sort of marketing and psychology to sort of incentivize people and game day goers to invest in something that will both help the environment and also potentially bring profit to BC's athletics department. We are also very cognizant of the waste corruption that's happening for context, it's when we put perhaps garbage materials into a recycling bin or maybe a recycling material into the compost. And we wanted to do something that would sort of overall decrease the amount of waste so that perhaps that waste corruption does not happen. Nudge mentality that we will be utilizing, as the cover there shows, is using low-level incentives to allow people to sort of reach a certain end result. So for example, we will be discussing sort of some incentives that we would like to use for our product. Oh, sorry, I keep forgetting you have that clicker. All right, so we are going to be passing around our product idea. Please feel free to look at this all in its entirety. It might not make sense right now because my colleague Joe will need to go over it, but for now, I will just begin talking about it and you can see with the general theory. So, using our nudge mentality, we want to really make the consumer feel they are heard and seen, because they are. BC football and BC athletics is a huge part of the institution's overall experience. And I'm a senior now, and I know BC athletics, BC football was a huge marker in my freshman year. And so what we want to do is we want to make this collapsible bowl, which will be made entirely of silicone. It'll compact so that it fits the BC Clear bottle, the BC Clear bag, and also it will have inserts, and that will be further discussed by Joe. And so, this product will be sold in BC affiliated events, and so there will be a price point on them, but truthfully, we're not looking really to make a huge profit on this. Really, the idea is that we want to make something sustainable so that the price point will be about the same amount as what we will be selling it for. Now the inside, so right now what you have there is a splatter guard that we were able to procure, so that's not the actual product, but if you could imagine it, the bottom of the most extended part of the bowl, sort of, yep, and then you just extend it, yep. Yeah, this one's, it's tough. On the bottom, you'll see in this picture here, the inside will just have an etching in the silicone of Baldwin. Just some BC marketing, and also when you're using the product, you can just see a little BC logo. And then on the outside, using nudge mentality, we want to put some statistics and fun facts. So there was a study made by PSE&G that when they put something on the energy bill saying how much you used, how much people in the neighborhood used, and how much people in the country used, people were more likely to want to decrease their energy usage because of the fact that they can compare themselves to their communities and the country. And so we would like to use a similar mentality where we implement fun facts and we say, oh, by using our product, you are helping BC do X amount. You are helping with reducing the carbon footprint by this thing or this or that. And then we would also like to extend it to, oh, this is how much time, money, and effort that perhaps you could be supporting with athletics, with facilities, with the Office of Sustainability, so on and so forth. And we'd also like to include the website link to the Office of Sustainability if they would like to additionally partner more. All of this would be etched into the silicone, so then if people decide to use this, since it is a dishwasher safe option, it would not run away as if plastic or printing would be used. And overall, we would also have, if you see on the bottom of the black one, we have a number there. There would be an etching there so that we can keep track of how many bowls we sell. Reason being, when we sell these bowls, the reason that we believe that it will sell is because of the promotions and sort of the nudge mentality that we will be focusing on. So for example, if, let's just say 40% of the stadium brought in this bowl, used it in the game days when they were buying in concessions, then we would say something like everyone in the stadium would get maybe a $3 reduction on the next game day's ticket. Or perhaps we might say something like, if maybe 15% gets it in, everyone in that current day gets a free bag of chips. BC would not be losing profits because what we could also say is that in the next year, we just raise all of the food prices and just to make that decrease. So then there would not be a profit loss. And we could also ask the cashiers to start asking, oh, would you like to buy the sustainable option? Because if a family of, let's just say 4, buys one bowl and then they carry it throughout the entire game day season, they can end up saving a very large amount of waste that a colleague may go over later. And then we will spread the knowledge on through the listservs, athletics, communications, so on and so forth, and also all of the different forms of marketing that BC offers.
I'll go over the specs of the product. So we're envisioning a bowl that can carry basically the food that people buy at these games. Again, these will be dishwasher safe. They'll fit in the clear bags that people bring to games. They can hold the combo deal for hot dogs and 2 drinks, chicken, popcorn, pretzels, pizza slices, basically enough food for parents and 2 kids to go up and get enough food to last through halftime. And these can replace paper trays, pizza boxes, popcorn bags, paper cups for chicken, basically a lot of the waste that fills up the trash cans at these games. And, oh, next slide. We also know people buy a lot of drinks at these games, and that's why we're envisioning the BC water bottles that will also be sold at the games. If people decide to take the combo deal, oftentimes they're juggling a lot of drinks. That's why we also came up with the idea of those cup inserts that are also collapsible, hopefully in the future. Right now they're a bit rigid. They can insert into your bowl to carry up to 4 drinks, and this will hopefully reduce the waste generated by water bottles, big plastic cups for soda drinks, the small cups, plastic cups for poured wine that people sometimes opt to use.
So going into our profit analysis right now, in order to show that this is an endeavor that can be undertaken, we've assumed that the plate may be sold for $14.99. When paired with the cup, that would raise the price up to $29.99. And in using very conservative estimates, we've come up with just 5,000 in sales and 10,000 plates produced. And we use these estimates just to give you a picture of just how large of a scale this can be, because with average Boston College games having about 35,000 people in attendance, that gives you a total available market of about $500,000, ranging all the way to $1 million if every single person were to purchase the combo. However, obviously we know that this will not be possible, so in looking at our estimates, we came out to profits just under $100,000 with total cost of $49,000 based on industry averages of materials that are needed in the production, along with fixed costs that are involved in the contracts. This would give us an enormously high profit margin of almost 50%, but as profit is not our primary focus in this mission right now, we want to encourage BC Athletics also to use some of those extra profits in giving that to charitable donations and use it as an extra incentive in order to sell more bowls. And organizations could be such as the Flynn Fund, which provides scholarships for various athletes. So my colleague May will now go over the environmental impact of this plate.
Yes, so I will be talking a bit about the product itself, the waste that we'll be reducing. So in case you have any questions about silicone itself, it is actually non-toxic to both land and marine environments. So should this ever end up in some sort of ecosystem, it wouldn't be toxic to those ecosystems. And what I have here is a graph of some of the data that you guys gave us. So this is talking about the waste at a football game for last year's season. And as we know, Parents' Weekend is such a big variable in all of this that we actually made the data include and exclude Parents' Weekend so that we can kind of see the actual reflection of the waste produced by BC community and not just their family and friends when they come that day. So this is also some data that you guys gave us. So here is the vendor data that we had in that original pamphlet. And as you can see, there are a lot of question marks. And there are a lot of subnotes that are saying, assume error in this line and assume error for this product. So what I got here is a hypothetical of 2 of our products. And I compared it to the number of seats in Conta Forum to the number of seats in the stadium, right? So Conta Forum is probably around 8,500 seats. The stadium is around 44,000 seats, and so we just times that number by 5 to give you these estimates today on how much waste we could be saving. So if we times all of these by 5, right, so the average number of hot dogs sold at Conti Forum was 300, so we times that by 5 to match the stadium's numbers, got 1,500. The paper trays that they could or could not come in are 45 grams, so did some math, figured it out, and that total waste for 1,500 hot dogs is 68 kilograms. Taking that off the top number of 2,213 kilograms of waste from game day that day. Then we have the average number of pizzas sold at Conta Forum, which was about 150. So yes, so we times that by 5, kept going, and the pizza boxes were 91.9 grams. I actually believe that should say average number of pizzas is 750. I can do math. 91.9 grams, times that all together, and we're still chiseling away that total number of kilograms to 2,086. Now I know that seems like a small amount to be taking off the total, but when you think about our actual product and the versatility of it, this is eliminating waste for multiple pieces, or multiple items of food. So if we have a combo in there where we originally be having all the plastic for chicken fingers, all the plastic for the cups and things that aren't actually compostable or biodegradable, all of those things would be fitting into one versatile product. So there are entire categories of waste that we could just eliminate with the selling of these products. So it's not like these numbers are just chiseling away at small proportions. Like, it would eliminate entire areas of waste that we had originally gotten rid of.
So concluding our presentation today, I wanted to go over our action plan, which all of these things say 2023, but could be carried over into further timelines in the future. So starting off, when we partner with Team Treebeard, the process will start always with the NCAA application process for new merchandise, as well as finalizing logistics with current companies Boston College is working with in order to produce these new materials. Additionally, we recommend that BC Athletics consult with the experts at BC in order to source products in the most sustainable way possible, and all of these things will be wrapped up by the end of the summer. Additionally, during the fall, we will start promoting these products with the plates and the bottles, and we want to incentivize as many customers as possible. But we also recommend that if we are doing this project this season, that Boston College Athletics starts with a limited sale to gauge interest, along with creating a survey possible. In the off season, we'll adjust for new markets as well as account for the turnover that will happen in terms of the customers, and come back with an even bigger sale the following year that will take account into new customers. So judges, I want to ask you today if you would like to partner with Team Treebeard and play up a reusability renaissance here on the Heights. Thank you very much, and we will be happy to take any questions.
I have a question just on barriers for different audiences. I think a pathway to game day for students is different than, say, a season ticket holder or someone who may come on a single game basis. So what do you see as potential barriers for each of those target groups?
Honestly, so basically, I think just for students at first, I think the big part is educating them on the impact of the environment that they will be making, in addition to making display accessible, as well as giving them an incentive to get these bowls, as some of our raffle prizes include very exclusive things that students may not be able to get their hands on, such as season tickets or meet and greets with football teams. team, so just that incentive that we want to grab them in. In addition, with season ticket holders on the other hand, I believe that we can attract their attention to the bowls by just showing how much more they can contribute than they already are. As we are doing with the nudge mentality, we're already showing them just how much impact that they can make by doing something so little, just as buying a single plate from us. Hopefully that answers the question.
I have a question about the potential kind of knock-on effect here. By bringing the collapsible bowls in there, have you thought about how you might deal with the new waste stream that's created for those who buy the bowl and leave it behind?
So I was thinking a bit about that when I was researching the silicon that we wanted to use for the prototypes, and knowing that it was non-toxic to environments such as like air and marine, we knew that if there was a possibility of it getting left behind, at least it would not be creating any further damage to the environment that we have here. So of course the idea is for them to be able to fit in the bags. So the possibility of them leaving behind is up for debate. But if they're already only able to bring in their clear plastic bags, it'll fit right in, they'll know it's there. Of course we can't eliminate the idea of people forgetting to bring them with them, but because of the price and because of the versatility and because they're new, we're thinking that it will draw enough attention where that possibility, if not eliminated, is greatly diminished. So.
Additionally, we'll have small incentives for the amount of people that do bring the bowl in. So for example, another one is perhaps if a certain percentage of people bring the either the bowl and the bottle together or just the bowl, then there will be that percentage off on the next game day ticket. If not, it could be something like, oh, you will have a raffle, and if you bring in your bowl, you can then enter a raffle for a Baldwin plushie. Because who doesn't want a plushie? Baldwin plushie, yeah.
We want to create it to be a product that people think about when they go to football games is like carrying their phone or carrying their ID if they're over 21 and want to drink while they're there as well, right? They want it to remind themselves of this is something I need to have when I go. Just like I need to have clear plastic bags so I can bring all my things with me, the same mentality will be for these products that I need to bring that with me so that I can carry all my food. Because not only is it just something that's great for the environment, it's actually useful, you know, for yourself. Because if you have a ton of little kids and you're waiting in line and you want to get everyone's food, like I mean, you know, this metal rim won't be here, it'll be hard silicon, right? But it's useful to you as well. It's something that gives you convenience to share with your family and to share with the people that you go to the game with. And so we're hoping that the idea of this product is something that you want to bring with you will, you know, eliminate possibly leaving it behind, and it's just they would want to have it.
I have a question, if I may. This item here, can you just explain this more in detail, please?
So this came about because we knew that oftentimes the reason why people take trays is not because they have so much food, but because they have so many drinks that they're buying. And so we were thinking about a collapsible insert that you put into the bowl, and you can fit 4 drinks. So that's how this came.
Okay. I guess I was looking at it upside down. So.
Oh, sorry.
I heard the collapsible pot, but I was like, okay.
Yeah, it's the same material as that silk.
Yeah.
Understood. Thank you.
We also did some research at a hockey game, and we actually collected every single cup that was available at concession stands. Unfortunately, we don't have that today, but for the sake of our demo, we did make this to scale. So from something that's as small as the wine cups to as big as the chicken tenders cups, they would actually fit into each of these, and the reason this is designed this way is because this is also collapsible. So this would also be flat and could sit in the bowl with this. And then on the top here, there would be a very thin layer of silicone so that it actually stretches over the top of the bowl so that you create tension to hold a heavier drink, say, like the sodas.
Okay, I think that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for presenting.
Thank you.
Also, if you have any additional questions as well, please feel free to email us as well further. Thank you so much.
Okay, so let's begin. So good morning everyone, this is GreenHead, and today we're going to present you with our Boston College Green Game proposal. And this is Isabella, here are my teammates, Rosie, Jessica, and Yuchen. So let's begin. So today our content will be divided into 4 parts. First is a general background, and then we will present our solutions, mainly focused on the food waste and traffic congestion, which are the 2 main sources of food waste, of waste for current sports events. and last we will give our financial budget. So the background. We will divide the game day into 3 parts: the pre-game, in-game, and after-game. So during the pre-game and in-game, the food waste are the main concerns for now, as people bring their food and drinks to the campus and stadium, and how to reduce this food waste and how to recycle them properly after these wastes are generated are our main concern for now. And the after-game, the traffic congestion is definitely one of the current problem, as people try to get out of the campus at one time, and that will produce a lot of greenhouse emission and cause problems. And our proposal will be formulated based on this zero waste hierarchy. So we will use rethink, reduce, reuse, and recycle, which are the 4 most efficient way to guide us to the zero waste. So the food waste. So currently, for each school year, Boston College sports event will generate about 0.5 tons of food waste, and this is approximately equal to about 5,000 pounds of greenhouse emission, which cause a lot of burden to the environment. So our proposal will try to solve this problem both on the production side and consumer side. So first, what can we do on the production side as Boston College? So we can enhance our forecasting model for our food preparation. Currently, Boston College uses a kind of machine learning model to predict how many food and drinks we need to buy before each sports event. But currently, this model is not as accurate as enough. So our proposal is that we can recruit some professions or even students at Boston College, computer science department, to help us to improve this model. So based on our past selling data, we can definitely improve the accuracy of this model, so we do not need to waste a lot of food afterwards. And also we can implement some get 2 buy 1 free activity at the end of each game. Some of the cooked but also food like pizza or hot dogs cannot be refrozen afterwards. So instead of just throw them away, we can try to sell them at a cheaper price. So we can just implement this kind of activity near the end of each game. And also we can increase the storage place at common form. Currently, as the food waste at Boston College, this paper states that the storage place at common form is not big enough. So some of the food we bought are, because it cannot be stored properly, they just be waste. So instead of just waste them, we can buy 1 more freezer to store them. And also we can donate the ounce of food at each game, after each game, to some local charities or organization. And based on our research, one of the potential partner can be Rock and Ready Up, and it has a base at Boston, and it also has a specific program called Sports Wrap that focuses on to collect this food after each sports event and donate them to the poor and homeless.
And besides the production side, we also tackle the food waste problem from the consumer side. That we decide, as Isabella mentioned before, that when people come together, they will produce a large amount of waste. And many of the garbage just lie on the ground and nobody counts it. So in order to deal with these questions, we design a questionnaire and we send it to the 60 persons that we randomly selected in the library, sitting in the library. So we ask them, do you ever throw the garbage on the ground, and why do you do that? And what's the common type of garbage that, the most common type of garbage that you see that lie on the ground? And for the first 2 questions, they said, I even cannot see a garbage cans. And then that is, and they also answer that the garbage cans is all filled with many garbage, so there is not enough room for them to throw their garbage. So we just, and also for the 3rd question, they said the top answer is the residue of the hot dogs and the bottles of beers and other beverages. So our first method is just to put more trash cans in the more obvious place, and we should clearly define what types of garbage cans what types of food that they throw in the garbage cans. For the recycling one and food residue and other things. And we can have the large pictures attacked on the surface of the garbage cans, just like the one in the garbage cans in the lines hall. So we are going to place the large size of the garbage cans in the pre-game period, and because there are many rooms, And with this limited space, like in the stadium, we are going to put the medium size of garbage cans, like the smaller one, like in the middle of the gateways, like between the part A and B and between B and C and so on, so that it can increase the efficiency of garbage disposal. And also we can also include more volunteers, like to stand near the garbage cans to help them sort the garbage. We all know that BC has done this project before, and we can just reuse this idea. And also we can let the students wear the unique T-shirt that so that people can have more awareness of environmental protections and throw the garbage in the garbage cans. And also the last method can decrease the expense that is used to clean the garbage. And also we can change the method of the garbage disposal from the landfill to the composting. And also cooperate with other other companies which dealing with the problem of recycling and the composting. We have contacted the managers of BC that who tackle this, who are responsible for this field, and they said that the most common ways that BC used to deal with the garbage is to use the landfill, which is pretty harmful to our environment and our health because it can produce methane and other greenhouse gases. So we can have some alternatives like the composting, like we can change the food residues to the fertilizers that enrich the soil.
So as we just talked about in our zero waste hierarchy, redesign, reuse, and reduction are important. And here's the one way that we're gonna implement the sustainable behavior and action is to create this new identity called Green Eagles. So Green Eagles are the eagles who care about environment and make the commitment to sustainable development. And the goal of this concept is to encourage BC community to adopt sustainable actions and ideas. And the effect will be create a sense of community and common mission in promoting sustainability. And one practice we're gonna implement this concept is to have these reusable refill cups. So during the game day, like tons of people will buy drinks that are containing in the plastic bottles, and after that, there will be multiple cup bottles purchased by one person, and they will just throwing it all the way. So those bottles are huge amount and cannot be recycled properly. So what we want to do is to sell a reusable container at each food and drink station, which is inspired by BC Dining's Green to Go program, where students can buy this one reusable cup and they can, and as long as they bring this to the dining hall, they can get long-term discounts, and they will create long-term incentive for students to keep using this reusable container. And it will be a special design with the Green Eagle logos. And this also works successfully in Orlando Universal Studios. So they have those refill cups and to help them reduce the waste production. So that's just let the BC Game Day be just as fun as a day at Universal Studio. You came here with your reusable bottle and you can save your money and also save the environment. And the other example is the Green Eagle shopping bag. This is inspired by Trader Joe's reusable shopping bag. So this is kind of this is a way that we can promote sustainable actions during the game day. Like you can carry your things with this bag, and also after the game day, you can just bring those shopping bags to buy groceries. And this is kind of also a way that can help promote eco-friendly practice outside BC, beyond BC community. And the overall benefits of those products to increase the awareness of environmental protection, and also it can help boost funds for implementing other sustainable initiatives on campus. So if we must sell something like the BC Game Day merch and tailgate, why don't we just sell something more eco-friendly and can help students and the greater community to implement greater awareness in sustainable actions?
as we know before, food waste is not the only problem during the game day. In fact, a lot of studies have shown that the air quality during game day will be highly deteriorated even during these couple of hours. And I know you guys might ask, why will air pollution during matter with game day? But in fact, especially after the game, as we saw the picture before, these people will go out of the stadium immediately, which will cause idling car, which will release unnecessary emissions because these people are stuck in the stadium, they can't get out, and there are so many cars. So here are our solutions for the traffic congestion. So our first strategy is to ask people to leave the stadium in turn. So we would like to people sitting in the front to leave the stadium first, and then let people in the back to leave the stadium 15 minutes later. I know people during that time will be very, very nervous. Oh, why should I leave later? But we think during this time we can play some background music, and I know there are a lot of screens during the stadium, so we can put videos about BC football team, for example, before and during the game to encourage these people still in this environment of game day. And our another strategy is to implement a designated drop-off stops for people who are using sharing transportation like taxis, Uber, for example. And here is a map of our school's current parking slots for game day. And we designed 2 drop-off stations, which the first one will be on the Beacon Street, and the second one will be near the College Road to avoid the most common traffic congestions, especially during the lower campus. So another strategy is to encourage people to use sustainability transportation, such as the Green Line B stop at Boston College. We know many people might get nervous, especially if they have a long distance from the subway stop to the stadium. So we would like to hand out these hand-drawn maps about telling our audience about where they should go from the Boston College Green Line B stop. And we will also like to send these hand-drawn maps to the people who near our shuttle station. We have shuttle which will run every 10 minutes. So during this 10 minutes, people can get to the stadium during the shuttle. And our last strategy is to implement arriving time choice when people buy the tickets. This is a strategy to avoid traffic congestion before the game day. So when people buy the tickets, for example, they can choose their designated coming time. For example, people can come in every 10 minutes. For example, we have slots from 9 to 9:10. We have slots for 9:10 to 9:20. In that way, people will come to their assigned time, so we can avoid traffic congestion before the game. And finally, I would like to talk to you guys through our financial budget. So here is our sample financial budget sheet. We would like to divide so here is the things we are going to use. The first one is general admission for Green Ideas. We expected this expense will be around $700. And second, we have selling our merchandise. As my amazing teammate said before, we are going to sell canvas bag, water bottle, and container. And we just use this estimation based on the 12 games each season. So we approximately will gain the profits of $3,600. And for the trash cans, we plan to put 315 trash cans during the campus on the game day. So it will cost about $5,250. And for the freezer for storage, it will approximately cost $2,000 for each freezer, which will cost about $2,000. And I know it might be a lot of money for you guys to think about. That's why we have our sponsorship product. So our current sponsor, so we divide our sponsorship into 2 parts. So for the first type of sponsorship, they can give us inventory merchandise. For example, we can ask Coca-Cola company to help to produce these water bottles to us. We can also ask New Balance to produce the t-shirts that volunteer will wear. And other sponsorship could also donate money to us. This is the 4 main sponsorship other school university has been using, especially promoting the idea of zero waste game day. These companies has had a mission to committed to the eco-friendly environment, and I believe they are the suitable sponsorship that we are looking for. And that's all for our presentation. Thank you so much.
All right, so we have 5 minutes for any questions from the judges.
Did you see any in your research any examples on the transportation side where sports events or other events have done some of the ideas you presented?
Sure, I think that's a really good question. And I know like Boston College, unlike many other like universities, for example, Boston universities, they have very sufficient public transportation, which will let the people to come to the campus like easily. I know many of our, like besides BC students in our school, many people come to game day, probably alumni, and they, I know it's like very hard to ask them to just came to the campus using public transportation because of limited stops during about green light, and it will also cost a lot of time. So that's why we want to mainly focus on the traffic congestion. And talking about what other schools did before, we did research on the North Carolina State University, where they asked people to, they set up different shuttle stops for people to get in. And I think this is an idea that we've already used before because we already have shuttle and we have different stops around the campus. And that's why I think during the shuttle stops, we send out these hand to a map will also be a useful way to people to come to the campus.
I just have a comment. Your eagle designs are fantastic. I don't know where you got those, but I'd like to know. When you think about the actual Beacon Street Commonwealth Ave with the transportation question, what about cars that actually don't come on time and cause the congestion, the backup? How would you handle that situation?
In terms of the arriving system, we actually think that we cannot actually force them. Like we cannot think if you did not arrive at the designated time, you cannot get in. But we try to like highly encourage people to like to follow their arriving time. And we think once they have like the general idea of what their choosing time, they may come like in that time or even arrive that time like 30 minutes in that range. So I think that can still help them to spread like the whole arriving time. So I think the system can still work, even though like ideally, but definitely better maybe than the current situation.
I have one quick question in regards to the Green Eagle, the new identity. If you would like to, either one of you can elaborate a little bit more about that concept. It seemed to be quite interesting.
Yeah, so the Green Eagle concept is just a new idea we're going to promote in the whole BC community for the current students and faculties and also the alumni beyond. And the main way we're doing this, we put in our financial budgets, putting some banners about it, and we can also, like Baldwin wear a green shirt and like volunteer where those shirts have a Green Eagle logos on it. And I think if we have that logo on the merch that we're gonna sell, it actually further encourage alumni to buy it. So because you have that bottle with the Green Eagle logo, it's showing that you are proud of your identity as a student in BC community, and also show your commitment to the sustainability.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, hello everyone. We're here for the Green Queens, as is our name on the sheet. We're here for the Eagle Sustainability Case Competition, and we're all seniors. We're all roommates in the mods right now, and we've always been really passionate about sustainability. We all have a different stake in some way in the sustainability culture on campus, and we all are studying different things, bringing different perspectives. So we wanted to start a little bit with some introductions of us and who we are. So I'll start. I'm Natalie. I'm studying finance. I'm currently a student sustainability manager at BC Dining, and I'm also the president of Real Food BC.
I'm Maureen. I'm president of Eco Pledge here at BC, and I'm studying environmental geoscience. I'm excited to continue at BC next year pursuing a double eagle. I'm going to be a master's student in philosophy.
Hello, I'm Hanan. I'm an international studies major studying political economy and developmental studies. And I currently work at the Plex, and I used to intern at the Office of Sustainability. So our whole main initiative is based around this mock-up that we made. Is a logo that we borrowed from a little pieces around BC marketing, and it's called Green the Heights. Green the Heights is made up of 30 main prongs of concessions, programming, and tailgating. Our main mission in Greening the Heights is making sure that Boston Game Days are more sustainable for both the fans, athletics, and concessions, as well as facilities.
To talk about concessions, we've broken it down primarily into plastic waste and food waste. To talk about plastic waste, these are just some of the outlines that we'll get into in more depth in the next slides. going to talk about water bottle fill stations, reducing single-serve packaging units, and also introducing compostable products. And then with food waste, we'll talk about composting, end-of-game deals for concessions, and real-time monitoring with the point-of-sale system. A water bottle fill station, we made a mock-up here. There already are water bottle bubblers in Conti and alumni, but they don't currently have a water bottle fill station, and they also aren't turned on. They've been off since COVID, which is a major problem. We need to be able to give fans access to water on campus. So we propose to, in tandem with the clear bag policy, also introduce a clear water bottle policy. This can be a perk for first-year students, give them a BC bottle, and allow them to bring an empty bottle into the game so they can fill it up with water and stay hydrated, which is super important, especially on game days. It's also a lot less cleanup of facilities. A lot of the recycling bins get filled up with different plastic water bottles and overfill. It becomes very difficult for them to clean up. So this would reduce a lot of general waste. Reducing packaging as well. The condiments, the individual packets as opposed to the large pumps. The pumps are considerably cheaper for BC dining and services. And so replacing them would be considerably lowering the cost. Also providing small paper cups, which are compostable. They're insanely cheap, so it's a negligible almost price. That would allow fans to still carry away condiments if they want to. Of course, we already have an existing supply that we would need to phase out. And according to fans' reaction, perhaps there always will be a few to grab from, but it would considerably lessen the waste. And to talk about compostable products, BC Dining already has a great relationship with world-centric composting. We do a lot of partnering with them to create the right products that we need. We obviously have a relationship with Coca-Cola products. With our contract that we've signed recently, we can hope to reinstate in the coming seasons when we re-sign that partnership where they can help actually subsidize some of the cost of putting their logo on these cups, because they prefer to have us be drinking knowing that we're drinking Coca-Cola products. So in these mock-ups, you can see Coca-Cola and BC logoing on the cups, which would be compostable, easy access, basically the same interface for fans right now, but with less waste. And it would have a equivalent or slightly higher cost, of course, but with BC Dining already committed to this pledge of transitioning to compostables, it's something that BC as a whole has already marked our progress towards and committed ourselves to. And athletics joining the dining would, of course, even lower the cost, purchasing in bigger bulk, and hopefully help in the future reduce costs overall for the rest of the community as well by increasing demand.
A big part of tackling our food waste component of our presentation is to build off our partnership currently with Save That Stuff. So Save That Stuff actually does offer recycling and compost, which can be seen through our partnership with BC Dining as well as the dorms. So currently the way that composting is set up with in alumni is that there isn't really composting, so we're proposing that we should add a Save That Stuff stop to be able to take a lot of this food waste as well as these new, hopefully, compostable products. We understand that adding a stop is an added cost, but we feel as if adding this cost will not only mitigate the amount of food that is going to landfill, it would also encourage and show the community that BC is making a lot of efforts to be sustainable. When we were looking at alumni, we were trying to figure out the big factors that there isn't a lot of space to add composting bins or composting trash recycles like dumpsters, but we decided that when we were looking through the space between concessions, that there is, if we were to eventually change one of those trash bins into being a compost receptacle, that way all that waste that would go into trash can actually be composted, and as well as the added cost of adding one of these small little trash bins by where fans are going into the stadium. Just because personally I know that when we're going in we're chowing down a hot dog, we're finishing our pizza, a lot of that waste just goes straight to trash, but I think by adding a compost option, fans and alumni will be able to know that we care about food waste.
In tandem with these compostable products too, if they have their hot dog in the brown paper container and they maybe don't finish it, they can toss the whole product into the compost bin. They don't even have to worry about sorting.
So another part of our food waste problem is the discounted concessions. Currently before the game, there's 50% off
discount on all concessions, so that incentivizes fans to get into the stadium earlier. And we were thinking about using that same model by trying to keep fans longer, since most people do leave the game earlier than we would expect them to or want them to, by offering 50% off incentive for the fourth quarter. These products would be products that would be technically counted as overflow products that could be sold at near cost to not only increase your profit margins, but reduce waste. And this is the biggest problem in our food waste combating initiative, and that is to utilize our current point of sale system, which is spot on. Since we just transferred to this new point of sale system, there are a lot of features and capabilities that we haven't really looked at that I think could be super helpful into mitigating our food waste. So the way that the point of sale system is currently set up, you can see what is being sold at every single concession stand by itself and what inventory they currently have. So we're proposing that by using the point of sale system capability to our advantage, we can then not only create data sets for future purchasing habits so that we can better estimate what types of food that we need for game days when it's rainy, what kind of competitors that we're playing, or in general, just so that we can mitigate how much food is lost when we're doing purchasing, as well as a really neat a neat part of Spot On in general is that because it's real-time monitoring, I can click on stand 5 and see that they have like 50 hot dogs left. But we're really not going to sell 50 hot dogs, so you don't need to be creating more hot dogs. And in that way, we can mitigate how much production is happening in the current moment, as well as understanding how much inventory is left when consumers buy.
So now the question arises of who's actually going to be looking at these point of sale systems and things like that. So here's where we get into the programming prong of our initiative, Green the Heights, which is where we're proposing BC Athletics hire at least 2 sustainability student interns for a paid position. So this would work similarly to the way that BC Dining currently has an internship, in which we actually also have like data analysts who are working with our database and stuff for BC Dining. So we are taking from data analytics majors and computer science majors, where the students are really able to benefit from having an on-campus paid experience. And then of course, they're also great in helping in reducing the food waste. So the responsibilities of these student interns would be to actually be the ones monitoring this point of sale system, looking at the live time data, and also being able to predict, looking at past data and predicting trends for how much should we order for the Notre Dame game or something like that, based off of past historicals and such. So another part of what the student interns would do, besides actually monitoring the system, would be to just facilitate some tailgate programming, including the Green the Heights volunteers, which I will get into now. So the Green the Heights volunteers would wear this great sticker that we mocked up here. And essentially we're proposing that the volunteer program kind of works similarly to concessions, in which groups with a tax ID and proper forms are able to get a stipend for working a game. And so these volunteers would be working in 2 ways, one of which is at our donation station. So the donation station we propose should be in the lower tent village on Maloney Lawn near the Mods tailgating area. BC Dining currently already has a tent there, so if we were to add another where these volunteers would work, we were hoping that there could be a table where all fans could take half their tray of bagels if they hadn't finished, or some leftover Jersey Mike's if they had overpacked or something. And they could all go to this table that the volunteers are standing at, and any other passerbys, like students and things, can come by and get some snacks on their way. You know, students are always scrounging for food on game days. And so this could be a great way for that to happen. And then also, right before the game actually starts, these volunteers would be able to look at all the food that's there. Anything that's donatable, that's actually in good condition, we could partner with Every Bite Counts, which is a club on campus where they donate to Rescuing Leftover Cuisine, an organization nearby that they actually distribute the food to people in need. So any food that's good for that can totally be donated, and otherwise it can be composted. We suggest that this is a better option than just having compost bins laid out around the mods, for instance, on game day, because frankly, not everyone really knows how to sort their trash. There's a lot of room for contamination and just general confusion. So kind of streamlining this there would be a great idea. Another option for what these volunteers could do is handing out the trash bags and recycling bags. We know that that's currently already an implemented thing, but to have the Green the Heights volunteers do it, they could also have some informational signage that goes along with it as they're handing it out, a little sheet of paper that says how do they sort their trash, why it's important, and things like that. Just an opportunity for more education. And speaking of education and signage and things like that, here are some other mock-ups of some composting signage that we can have, like relatively low-cost A-frame, things like this that can be posted around near the table. And we could also hand out some fun koozies for Green the Heights and other promotional merchandise that could help just create brand awareness for this new initiative and also just promoting the Green the Heights initiative in general. And as well, we also have this tailgating tips thing that we can put on a mock-up of the website, which we'll show in a second, but also maybe send out an email for tailgaters once they receive their tickets or something. Just talking about some general tips for how they can be more sustainable when they're coming to our tailgate and not bring as much waste with them to begin with.
As Ali mentioned, especially in tandem with tailgating, a major part of active sustainability on Gamedays is coordinating with the fan base entirely. So creating a landing page on the BC Athletics website for fans and alumni to reference in search of information, how to be sustainable, what to bring, what not to bring. We made a mock-up of a little tailgating tips guide that we could hand out at the beginning of games as well, and offer a general sense of BC values to push our sustainability initiative forward.
And based off what Maureen was saying, I know that BC participates in the ACC Sustainability Network. Currently, when we do that network, we have this great initiative, Equals for Equality, and we're proposing that not only do we add this to our landing page, but we can show how we're serving as leader in the ACC conference, as well as our commitment to the zero waste game day policy.
So thank you to everyone for listening to us and for our Green the Heights initiative. We hope that with our experience and that we can help the sustainability legacy go on after we graduate, because unfortunately we're seniors. But we really think that this is a pragmatic and really reasonable solution, and we hope to hopefully see some of these initiatives soon.
Awesome. So we have about 5 minutes for questions and answers from the judges.
I think your branding is fantastic with Green Heights. I think your knowledge was great too, just from what you have. From a tracking standpoint, one thing that I'm looking at is, like, is it realistic to be able to have these hubs where you have one place, like on Maloney, you can have everybody come to, are they going to really carry their food there? I love that concept, and I'm also a little concerned of like what food you could actually take and how is it identified to reuse, if it's out there, how long it's been out there, hot game days, those kind of things. I think the concept's great. I just didn't know how practical that is to be able to execute that with some of the health
Ideally, we could expand upon this and put similar tents in different tailgating areas, but for now, we'd be primarily targeting the bond lot tailgating section. So with the Maloney Lawn right there in the tent village, it'd be really easy access. Fans are already walking by to get into the stadium. And with the Good Samaritans Act, this is less applicable for BC dining or athletics hot dogs at the end of the game, which we might have knowledge of at their exact temperature and whatnot could be considered unsafe. But with the Good Samaritan Act, a bagel left out on the table is generally considered an okay donation. And I'm sure students would probably scavenge the majority of it. But if there is something of the sort of a large Jersey Mike's case that someone left and forgot to crack open, oops, what do we do with it? That could definitely be something that would get to good use and really feed people who need it.
Yeah, and just generally speaking too, I think the majority of it, like you said, would be eaten or I think or composted. The Everybody Counts donation is probably like the least amount of food would actually be there. It's just another option for food that is like, you know, definitely deemed safe in some way.
I also know that the catering that's done in the lower tent villages is facilitated through BC Dining, so any of those extra boxes that you've already pre-bought could be brought to the front since it's right in the tent village, and that way patrons can just go, since you have to head that way to the good anyways.
I have one question. First off, love your colors.
Thank you.
I didn't even wear green.
We're the green queen.
So thank you for wearing green. The second question, my main question is, your waste monitoring system, has that been used anywhere else? And I mean, I caught everything what you said, but I didn't quite catch if it was used locally, it was used here on campus. Could you expound on that?
Of course. So the spot-on system, the way that the point of sale system is set up is that each one of those little iPads is set up to a concession stand so that you can have the known inventory, and then that way you can see not only the sales but what's left over. I've bartended before where we've used Spot On to not only track each individual sale but see how much product is left so that we can have bar backs run and bring us like either more beers or more seltzers. And using that same model, we were proposing that by knowing what inventory is where and using past data analytics of like buying trends, that way people don't have to keep on producing hot dogs until third quarter when they know historically people stop buying them during halftime, I would say.
And the Spot On also comes with handheld portables, which can be used to track data as well. And there are a lot of functions of this product that especially student interns, especially some that are interested in CS and stuff like that, would be able to really like get down to the nitty-gritty with and further expand upon the utility.
Is Spot On a system that's already used on campus?
Yes, it's a
It is.
system that is
Great. Thank you.
I guess I'll just make a comment. I think you guys understand the market well. And I think that that's really important as we think about what are steps that we can move forward. So I appreciate you guys bringing that forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, if that's all the questions we have, thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to presentation day. My name is Alexa Lombardi. This is Robert Brandel and Isabel Craven, and we're the Green Team. And this is our game plan for how Boston College can implement some sustainability initiatives for Gamedays. We'll begin by going through how we can reduce food waste, and then we'll consider reducing our carbon footprint. We'll move into the Clean Air Initiative and then talk about our feasibility throughout the presentation. First, with reducing food waste, Boston College's biggest problem is that we are producing too much product for the amount of demand. So we have two potential solutions for how we can reduce that food waste. First is get mobile ordering, something that's already associated with BC Dining, and then second we'll go to donations, and I'll present that in a timeline fashion when we get there. Get mobile ordering, I'm sure you've heard of it. Boston College has Get Mobile throughout campus, places like Tully Cafe, Coro Cafe, the Market. And we already can use payment methods like Dining Bucks, Flex Plan, or even credit cards. Implementation of Get Mobile throughout the concession stands at Boston College's Gamedays would be fairly simple. We could specify locations to be each individual concession stand itself, and then people can wait at their seat, depending on where their seat is located. They can go to the closest concession stand, whichever one is open, depending on the demand for those concession stands. And then they can wait. When they get their email, they go and pick up their food. Doing this would eliminate the line outside of those concession stands themselves, which would give gamegoers more time to spend with their family, watch the game, and shop for merchandise. Eliminating the line would also add a benefit of reducing the fire hazard that comes with the really long lines outside of the concession stands. And also, if you're spending less time waiting in line, you're more likely to buy more food. If I'm only waiting for 5 minutes, I'm probably going to say, I could use another hot dog. Whereas if I'm waiting for 30 minutes, I'm not going to do that. Next, we're only going to order what we need. As a buyer, someone looking to buy food, I'm only going to purchase exactly what I think I'm going to eat because I'm paying for it. And the volunteers will then know exactly what they need to make. I've worked at this concession stands before, and usually we'll make as many hot dogs as we think will sell, and then there's tons of extra. So now, by only ordering what they need, the volunteers will know exactly how much to make, and that'll reduce the need for slack in things like hot dogs, and we won't have as many excess hot dogs at the end of the game. And lastly, it provides preference analytics for Boston College, so we'll know how many hot dogs we're buying exactly, and how many of those are getting sold because we're making less, whereas right now we have a bunch of extra. So these preference analytics will allow Boston College to make better predictions on how much they should be buying and reduce the amount of food that's perishable and getting thrown away at the end of the season. Waste ultimately is inevitable. So even with this Get Mobile ordering plan, there's still going to be some extra food at the end of the game. There's nothing we can really do about that. But here's what we think we should do with that extra food because it's going to be made. First, consider an additional hot dog toss. If time permits in the game, and there's tons of extra hot dogs, we could throw some more out. Students will really enjoy it, and it's a way for us to make sure that the food is getting eaten. I can assure you that those hot dogs are fought for, so everyone's going to eat them. With that, there's still going to be some extra food. So next, I think we should encourage volunteers to take some food to go. Like I said, I've worked at the concession stands before. It's a hard day. There's a lot of people yelling at you. It's kind kind of sweaty, you could use the last meal on your way out. And I think it would also encourage volunteers to come back, which is good for Boston College. Next, post-game discounted pickup. So prior to games, like specifically the basketball games, students will show up 30 minutes early just because they want to buy their chicken tenders for half price. So if we consider doing a post-game discounted pickup, people could buy the food for half price at the end of the game that was already produced. And that would present a profit for Boston College that they wouldn't be getting anyways. It would also present food that's getting eaten rather than getting thrown away. So post-game discounted pickup would also be really simple to implement because we already have that system of half price before the game, so Boston College could just do one concession stand, bring all the food to that concession stand, and then allow students to go over and purchase that at the end of the game. Lastly, even with all of this, there's still going to be some leftover food. Not all of that would be eaten through the hot dog toss, letting volunteers take some, or even the discounted pickup. So our last initiative is to consider partnering with Rescuing Leftover Cuisine. Rescuing Leftover Cuisine is a nonprofit organization that focuses on food waste, and they work throughout the United States. They have some locations near us, and basically the program will take any amount of food at any time of day from any place, as long as it's produced from a reputable vendor and according to food safety standards, which is something that Boston College already does in our production of our food. Not to mention that food would also provide easy to access tax benefits for Boston College. And it's easy to implement because it will just go, they come and pick it up for you. So Boston College doesn't have to do much themselves. Rescuing Leftover Cuisine will come and then redistribute that food to people experiencing food insecurity.
So next we'll talk about ways that we can reduce our carbon footprint. And so we do this by targeting our concessions. And the first step is to reduce single-use plastic drinks, cups, lids, straws, and then as well as adding some plant-based alternatives. So the first initiative is to reduce our single-use drinks at Boston College concessions. As we know, a lot of vendors use plastic water bottles, cups, straws, lids, which ultimately just get disposed at the end of the day. And so our idea is to implement a BC My Cup program. And so what this is it uses microchip self-serving reusable cups. And it would be available for all students at Boston College for purchase. They have actually implemented this at Ohio State University and University of Reading in Great Britain. And it's a partnership with Coca-Cola using the Coca-Cola Freestyle machine. And so what you can do is when you buy your reusable cup, which you can personalize to say Boston College, it's clear, the microchips you refill with the amount of fills at the Coca-Cola Freestyle machine. So at Ohio State, they started by giving everyone 10 refills. And then you could load them on through the Coca-Cola website about how many refills you want when you're going to a game day, and then if you run out, you just refill it the next day, like on computer. And we think this would be really good for a lot of BC students. We already have Coca-Cola Freestyle machines in Mac, and students love them. They love that they can personalize a lot of the drinks. So we actually think it would increase sales of a lot of drinks. Going into a game day and being able to pick if you want cherry Coke, vanilla Coke, and also being able to like mix and match to fill your cup with the ounces that you loaded on. And then also free water would also be available through these Coca-Cola Freestyle machines. We also think it would be awesome to expand it eventually to everyone on campus and reduce our carbon footprint with disposable single-use cups in all of our dining halls.
Yep, so as Isabel mentioned, these innovative soda machines, the Coca-Cola Freestyles, are already on campus here at McElroy Dining Hall. They're very popular with students, and we recommend installing them in the concourses of Conte Forum and Alumni Stadium. We believe that this would be a very sustainable effort that would reduce game day waste associated with soft beverages. So first, using reusable water bottles at self-serve kiosks would generate equal revenues that they're making now, while contributing significantly less waste. We feel sales might even increase given shorter lines and the greater flexibility of options available compared to current offerings. Secondly, our research found that Freestyle Smart Pack cartridges are more eco-friendly than their traditional syrup alternatives. They have a lower carbon footprint, they're manufactured in a Gold LEED certified facility, and they contain 15 to 30% recycled content. So over the long term, we feel that this investment would generate a positive long-term impact on game day sustainability. Moving forward now to the concession stand's food offerings. We advise replacing certain items with lower carbon footprint alternatives. So for some, this might look like meat hot dogs and beef burgers replaced with Impossible burgers or vegetarian hot dogs. These items have a much lower carbon footprint and have the added benefit of expanding the menu to those on a vegetarian diet. Perhaps a more radical shakeup would be phasing out nachos in favor of French fries. The cheddar cheese on nachos alone have a significantly higher global warming potential, and we believe that demand for fries would eventually eclipse that of nachos. So to illustrate some of these changes, we decided to put together the prototype of a model demonstrating the effects of these menu changes on a carbon footprint. So for starting with our parameters, we've taken two of the more popular items, hot dogs and nachos, as I mentioned. The quantity produced data is from a men's basketball game, February 23rd, 2016. And emissions per kilogram data is based from a Forbes article and DOI.org. You'll also notice a column with alternative items per kilogram, and that refers to plant-based hot dogs and French fries, as I mentioned, which leads me to our decision variables. The user can enter a percentage of replacement. You'll see I've done 50% for each, and that for each category replaces the old item, hot dogs for example, with the new item, plant-based hot dogs, and the same for nachos. The model then calculates a revised items based on the percentage replacement, calculates a new footprint compared to the old footprint, and generates a percent difference, which is our objective cell in green. As a prototype, it's important to make a couple disclaimers. The first one being that, as you can see, it only takes into account two items. This is not a comprehensive picture of the total concession emissions on game days. And secondly, it assumes that demand would remain constant regardless of the percentage of replacement. In a future version, we'd like to incorporate more items, as well as consumer preference data about an old item compared to its alternative. But with that being said, there are still some valid insights to be gained. If you look at the sensitivity table, we notice that replacing nachos with French fries yields a marginally greater reduction in overall emissions than the hot dogs change. Of course, the greatest change can be made by replacing both, but for BC, this should be the first priority. Now I'd like to introduce item 3, our Clean Air Initiative. As many of you know, vehicle exhaust emissions are very harmful for our health. They aggravate asthma, allergies, cardiovascular disease, and respiratory diseases. It's also important to note that vehicle exhaust is harmful even when you can't see the fumes coming from a tailpipe. So at the end of game days, when we're all leaving, cars are pulling out of the various parking lots. The air may look clean, but it does not mean that each breath is not full of harmful chemicals. The Department of Health at Stanford also found that there is a link between higher air pollution and decreased athletic performance. So for BC Athletics, this should be top of the list. And to talk about how we're going to address that, Isabel is going to get into our proposals.
So two of the biggest contributors to air pollution, as we know, are charcoal grills and car idling. Car idling, for example, also is not efficient in that it burns a lot of fuel as well as producing all of the harmful chemicals. And charcoal grills produce what are known as polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which are known carcinogens, so we should be putting a lot of effort into reducing both of these producers of harmful chemicals. So our first initiative is to introduce fines on charcoal grilling and for car idling with certain regulations. So for charcoal grilling, we would encourage people to use propane grills, which produce much less harmful chemicals and don't produce the polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. And then we would also introduce a $100 fine for idling when temperatures are above 32 degrees Fahrenheit, if you're idling for more than 5 minutes, and when there's no one in the vehicle. These regulations have been introduced at other universities like University of Maine, and they found them really effective in decreasing the amount of PM 2.5 levels. But at the end of the day, we know car idling is going to be inevitable, and so we thought we would introduce an initiative that could just help reduce any of this pollution that ultimately will come from car idling. We live in New England where it is cold, and so people will need to heat up their cars to stay warm.
And so we found that in Europe, what they've started doing is what is known as installing green screens. And they've started this around a lot of elementary schools and public schools that are built close to highways where pollution from cars is very high and PM 2.5 levels are very high. Children, as we know, are more susceptible to the adverse effects of air pollution. And so it's been a real push towards trying to reduce these levels. And so what they did was they installed green screens, which basically act as a screen to filter out any of the pollution that is in the air. And they put these on fences. It can be like greenery, like vines, as well as flowers to make things look pretty. And what they found, they've done a lot of studies, is that it actually reduces the air pollution levels by up to 30% at a lot of these schools. So we think that we could install some of these green screens on parking lots, mod lot fences, the Maloney lawn fences, to ultimately help clean the air around the BC campus, which is inevitable with some of the air pollution.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. So we have about 5 minutes for question and answering session from the judges. So take it away.
I have a question about the charcoal grills. How many charcoal grills do we think we have on campus for game day? Is this a solution looking for a problem? And I ask that because my impression is there's not a lot, to be honest with you. And I think that before we start moving, when we think about, we want to make sure that we also keep the game day experience pleasurable for everyone. Are we policing 2 grills, or are we policing 2,000 grills? And that's something that and what impact do we think that has? I mean, obviously discouraging use, but going straight to $100 fines is a big step forward. Do you have any idea?
Ultimately, whether it's 2 grills or 2,000 grills, per grilling section, it produces like 6.7 kilograms per of carbon dioxide. And so I think it would be very effective in even reducing the little amounts of carbon dioxide and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons that it does produce, which are harmful to everyone around. And I also think it is more fuel efficient, and it will end up being cheaper to switch to a propane grill. You get more grilling sessions out of propane and produce less carbon dioxide. So I think people might find that it, in the long run, is more efficient.
I mean, maybe just something to think about. There are some steps between where we are today and a $100 fine. Like, how far along the change curve could you get with just a change in policy before we go to a change in enforcement?
Can you give any more information on what University of Maine's doing, how they're actually managing the idling?
So they introduced the fine for idling if you are idling in your car and it's above 32 degrees Fahrenheit.
Any idea how they enforce that?
I believe it has to do with just policing any sort of like car idling. If you're sitting in a parking lot and like someone walks by and they notice that the car has been idling, there's no one in it, or it is warm out, it's like the same sort of like ticket fine.
Okay. So it could be a student walk by, you could report, or you're not sure?
Not sure, sorry.
I think it's similar to the way that they police alcohol consumption of like students underage during game days. Like if they see and they know that they're underage, then they can.
I was just curious, the microchip costs, did you see anything relevant to Ohio State for what they did with that, the freestyle, like what their investment was?
I did not see the cost information on that. Did you for the micros?
No.
I think the biggest thing to highlight with the cost for that is that obviously the freestyle machines would be a big capital expenditure installed in all the stadiums. But as we mentioned, I think sales would eventually increase over time to recover the cost of that. As well as with the reusable bottles, you're not making those purchases on single-use materials. So between that and the increased sales, you would have the sale of the reusable bottle to students. But from that initial cost of buying the bottles and installing the machines as well as the refill cartridges. It would just be revenue from students uploading that microchip, which is, in the long run, we feel more efficient and sustainable.
Yeah, I think one thing to think about that here is that I would actually think the machines probably won't be a capital expense. I would guess that Coke would be more than happy to throw them in our stadium. It really is. But I think that to me, that's not where the big expense comes. It is in reworking what is an old stadium to handle brand new infrastructure for something like the freestyle machines, and to really think about, and here we're talking about working through poured concrete, that there is a real kind of hidden environmental impact of starting to rework poured concrete buildings, and to kind of think about what does that mean to install something like a freestyle machine. I think in the long run, your thesis is right. It is a good thing. But it is not without kind of some unintended sustainability costs as well.
All right, if we don't have any more questions, you're good. Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. We are the Greening Eagles. We're here to talk about sustainable game day solutions. I am Lauren Didikian, class of 2024. I'm a double major in management and leadership and environmental studies.
I'm Tyler DeFiore, class of 23. I double major in econ and poli-sci.
I'm Sancha Sahadev. I'm class of 2025 and I'm a biology major.
Hi, I'm Anisha Kundu. I'm also class of 2025 and I'm studying finance and minoring in environmental studies.
So before we dive deeper into our solutions, we first wanted to give everyone a roadmap of what this is going to look like. So we're going to start off with a comprehensive plan for outdoor composting. Then we're going to move into concessions/operations related solutions, which will include food, serviceware, and appliance related solutions. And then finally, we'll talk about a marketing campaign to tie all of this together and really promote it to the BC community. We also think it's important to highlight our approach when we think about these solutions. Obviously, sustainability is at the forefront of any of them. At the same time, a lot of sustainable solutions might not be fully realistic or require a lot of resources that might not be financially feasible or practical. And so those bottom two elements are really important for us in terms of thinking about what can BC actually do for sustainability within their resources, and also keeping in mind that financial bottom line, because that's what's going to push any project through. It's also important to note that these sustainable solutions are not just about doing good for the environment or the world. They can also give BC a legitimate competitive advantage compared to surrounding schools, and also potentially make some profit if deals are done correctly with sponsors, vendors, and partners.
So the first prong we're going to talk about is outdoor composting. So I just wanted to bring up this quote, "Food waste is responsible for 6% of global greenhouse gas emissions," to show why it's so important to compost, because composting reduces these emissions by reducing the methane released. So a brief overview of what we're thinking: give out composting bags, reinstate the Green Ambassador program, incentivize composting, and work with Save That Stuff. So before we move on, just a quick note on the compost bags. We already give out trash bags and recycle bags on game day, so this would just be adding an additional bag to that. We were proposing that it's a yellow bag to keep in continuity with all of our other composting initiatives. We have yellow in the dining halls and yellow compost bins, so this would just keep the same color to reduce confusion. To reinstate the Green Ambassador program, for those of you who are not familiar, the Green Ambassador program before COVID had students going around during game day to discuss sustainability initiatives, encourage people to recycle, and give out some education on that. So we would just like to update the program a little bit and reinstate it with composting education. Basically, we would have these students go around to all the tailgates and encourage them to use their composting bags that they now have and show them what can be composted, what can't be composted, and just generally encourage that. We would also like to get the students from eco clubs, the environmental studies department, and environmental geoscience, because we believe that these students will be very knowledgeable about composting already, but also understanding that anybody can be a green ambassador and be educated on the subject to be able to educate others. So really including the student body and getting them excited about the program as well. Also, after the tailgates are done and people go inside, we would like the Green Ambassadors to go around and check the composting bags from the different tailgates. And for those who have composted effectively and successfully, they will get a text message. The text message will say, you have gotten a free hot dog and a free soft drink from concessions. This will encourage people who doesn't like free stuff, so they'll be able to go to concessions and redeem this. While this may, you may think that this might be a financial burden for concessions, I would actually propose the opposite. A lot of the people who tailgate, they've already eaten and then don't end up going to concessions, but tailgaters come in a group. So if you're giving them one free hot dog and one free soft drink, they're most likely going to go and buy more things, which will increase the revenue of concessions. Lastly, we propose to work with Save That Stuff. We already work with them for our composting, waste, and recycle initiatives, and therefore it would just be an addendum to the contract instead of a new contract, which would make it a much easier process to be streamlined.
Okay, so now we're going to turn our attention inside Alumni Stadium and focus more on concessions and operations related solutions. So as previously mentioned, we have 3 general areas that we're considering here: food, serviceware, and appliances. And we're going to have a solution that touches on each of those elements. So first with food. Usually when people think about sustainable food, their mind goes to fruits, vegetables, locally produced items from a farm, for example. However, a lot of the time, those solutions, while doable, are more applicable to places with warmer weather, because BC in the fall is not going to be able to get food or fruits and vegetables from a local farm most of the time. And also, it's usually reserved for places like professional stadiums that have much more resources and can actually do those sorts of projects. BC in the past, as I learned from a conversation with Beth Emery, who's here today, BC in the past has tried doing salad or chicken wraps in the past. They just really haven't sold well. And so our approach to food is more focused on the traditional game day food experience and dealing with what does BC have right now in their menu, how can we make that more sustainable rather than adding new elements. So, like I just mentioned, improving sustainability of the existing menu. And for us, that means locally sourcing the food, making sure it's humanely raised without antibiotics, things like that. And this will build on BC Dining's fresh principles, which already exist. BC has these fresh principles which are applied to every dining hall, and Addie's in particular, which is on the 2nd floor of Lower, is really pushing this sustainable element. And so incorporating this into the BC concessions approach is also very important. And so a lot of BC's existing game day menu is actually locally sourced. So hot dogs are locally sourced, as well as hot dog buns, ingredients for pizza, pretzels, but there are still elements that can be more local. And so the goal for this would look something along the lines of increasing the percentage of food that's sold that is local or humanely raised, or something else along the lines of the fresh principles. Another take on a food-related solution would be bringing in new vendors. And to this point, this has been a challenge, at least inside the stadium. One of the reasons being due to the fact that Alumni Stadium's concourses are more narrow, and so it's tough to actually put a vendor with a cart in there. What we're envisioning is having one part of the stadium concourse set aside for people to have the opportunity to go to an outside vendor. And so that outside vendor would rotate every couple of weeks to bring new life into the stadium. We also had our group had a conversation with Frank Bailey, who works for concessions, and one place he suggested was Wheelhouse Burgers. It's a local Boston-based burger company, and it's important to notice that this type of product is still game day food. It's burgers, it's hot dogs, it's things that fans will like, but at the same time, it's definitely sustainable. It's promoting good, sustainable business practices, and that's a potential way to make profit in addition to being sustainable. We also think it might be good to have the opportunity for students to pay for these products with your Eagle IDs, because that would promote student use in addition to adult use, older folks who might be coming back for a tailgate or a game. Now we move into serviceware. And so Frank Bailey, who I mentioned earlier, who we had a conversation with, he said one room for growth that he definitely sees as low-hanging fruit is cups in concessions. And so right now BC uses a lot of plastic cups, and we think that a good alternative could be these aluminum cups. This particular cup, which is made by the Ball Corporation, has 70% recycled materials. And aluminum in general is very durable, it's very recyclable. 75% of all aluminum ever produced is still in use today. So you can always keep reusing it, and the cups themselves are infinitely recyclable. It's also important to note that these cups would not require any new infrastructure on BC's end in terms of receptacles for them. They can be recycled just like any other aluminum cup as is. And this sort of project has precedent. The University of North Carolina did a trial for this in 2019 where they partnered with the Ball Corporation, who again makes the cups, as well as Coca-Cola and Aramark. And they've had a lot of success with it. In 2021, they got a re-upped investment for it from a different outside firm. And so they took it from a pilot project to basically a mainstay at UNC. It's also important that BC has a long-standing and positive relationship with Coca-Cola as is. So if Coca-Cola was able to sponsor the UNC project, BC could use a similar approach here. And then lastly, to touch on appliances. So we suggest to have an inventory audit of the kitchen appliances for concessions. And this will really target energy efficiency, and in that way, contributing to reducing greenhouse gas emissions because you're not using as much energy to produce the same outcome. So for the audit, when the people go in and they decide, okay, this machine might need improvement, Energy Star is one company that has very highly energy efficient appliances. And over the long term, even though there might be a larger upfront cost to replace the machine, the utility bills over time will be lower.
Okay, so now onto marketing. How are we going to tell the overall BC community what we're doing and how we're doing it? So what we want to initiate is a sustainable game day committee that long lasts our initiative or any initiative that the Office of Sustainability could have. So we would include people from dining, athletics, facilities, the Office of Sustainability, and then also the general BC student body to make sure that there's constant conversation going on because this issue is very intersectional. So to have many voices going on is something that we would definitely encourage. We also want to try to include athletes. So I'm an athlete on BC's campus, and I'm a member of Equals for Equality, which is a diversity, equity, and inclusion organization on campus. I know that there is a lot of interest within Equals for Equality for sustainable measures for BC athletics, and we think including the athletes is a really good way to do this because we are directly involved with the sporting events. In addition, we were thinking about NIL deals, name, image, and likeness deals, where athletes would be able to sell their brand or basically market themselves by partnering with Save That Stuff. Save That Stuff already partners with a lot of community organizations, and a lot of athletes already have NIL deals. So by combining those two, we think that there could be a successful, long-lasting partnership.
It would also be a good idea to prepare a video advertising the Green Game Day initiatives to be played in the stadiums or in Conti Forum before games and during breaks. So what this video would do is basically summarize all the efforts that BC has already taken towards the Game Day initiative, and also basically talk about the implemented measures that are relevant for spectators who are coming in. We also think it would be a good idea to feature student leaders from athletics and also environmental organizations on campus. So what this video would essentially accomplish is it would efficiently inform spectators about what their role is, what are the resources that are available or have been made available through BC's Green Game Day initiative. It'll emphasize student leadership and collaboration at Boston College. It'll market BC as a progressive school that actually cares about sustainability, knowing that there are a lot of families and students who might prospectively consider coming to BC and might care about these things. And also it'll highlight and invite partnerships. So what we were thinking is our video could essentially be, if Save That Stuff agrees to it, we could essentially have it be a partnership between Boston College and Save That Stuff. The video plays to thousands of spectators who come and watch games, and companies want audiences who could potentially consider that product. So essentially our video could advertise for Save That Stuff in exchange for certain sponsorship, and these funds could be used towards the Green Game Day initiative.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you have.
So I can picture selling fresh franks, under, like, which is the fresh marketing label for sustainability. What would be in those frankfurters or hot dogs, as you in terms of the ingredients? And you mentioned sustainably or locally produced. Are you talking about that the ingredients are produced in the region, or that they're processed and made into hot dogs and the meat might come from the Midwest or other locations? Can you speak more about that?
Yeah, good question. So ideally, of course, everything is produced regionally, and usually by local, at least the fresh guidelines we talked about earlier, that usually means regional, so within New England. And for sure, I think all of those ingredients that go into the hot dog should be regional. And that would just be a matter of diving deeper into, who makes hot dogs in the area, looking into those sorts of companies, evaluating what they put in their hot dogs and having that conversation. I think would just be a next step in terms of exploration for this sort of thing.
So they already exist? Like those type of sustainable hot dogs, or more sustainable or fresh franks?
What do you mean by fresh franks?
You mentioned being able to have hot dogs that are sourced locally, and to maybe have the fresh label, which is fair trade, regional, equitable, sustainable, healthy, right?
Yeah.
So what would be in those frankfurters? I'm just going along with this idea.
Yeah.
I like fresh franks. That
Yeah,
sounds like
yeah,
I can sell. So what would actually, like, what would make it a fresh hot dog?
Yeah. So it has to do with the way that the farm, which would hopefully be a regional farm, raises the animals that go into the hot dog. So first of all, it's got to be regional, and then it's a matter of, do they treat the animals right? Are they raised humanely without antibiotics? Those are like sort of the things that we mentioned. And so I don't personally know like what the ingredients are of a hot dog, but I would say whatever those ingredients are, it's just a matter of talking to whoever the hot dog company is to see what actually goes into it. But I think it's more, with meat being the primary ingredients, that's all about, whether it's grass-fed, if applicable there, or like I said, without antibiotics, things like that, treated humanely. I think that's all those sorts of sustainability elements that people don't think about a ton that can still be incorporated into this sort of thing. I don't know if anyone wants to add or if that answers your question.
I think the criteria can sometimes feel subjective, just because I think it'll just require research being done on BC's part. And I think, inviting green ambassadors to join the program could involve students in that research. So students propose like potential collaborations. They put in the research, try to figure out what the company is doing, potentially make some calls, trying to figure out how this food is being produced, and then present that to BC Dining. I think that could be a viable way to go around it.
Thank you.
In your research, did you see how much the aluminum cups cost?
Yeah, so good question. So no, we did not. We were able to go on the ACC sustainability website. BC's an ACC school, so we wanted to compare to other local school, or not local, but same conference schools. And so we were able to dig up the pilot project as well as the additional investment that occurred in the University of North Carolina. Those articles did not have specifics on numbers. I don't know, and then again, so then we went on the Ball Corporation website, who makes the cups, and we saw that they do have opportunities for food venues, and they do this stuff a lot where they brand the cups and they send them out in bulk to stadiums like alumni. I think what I remember seeing from that site was, a sort of a link to reach out to them to have that sort of conversation. I don't think they had pricing on the site itself, so we don't have those exact numbers.
Another thing to note, as Tyler mentioned, was that when North Carolina used these cups, they got more investment to the program to increase their ability to use these cups and other sustainable initiatives. So by having things like these cups, it could incentivize donors, such as alumni who come to tailgate,
at the games to donate more money to further improve our programs going forwards.
So one question about the aluminum cups
Yeah.
at NC State. That was in the arena. Did they happen to use it at tailgating for football?
It was not outside. So by tailgating you mean like the outdoor space?
Yeah, like an outdoor football game.
No, I think I would say they let the tailgaters do their own thing. On the outside, they were inside the stadium.
The reason I brought up tailgaters is because they're the people who would be moving inside, and also it's no secret that tailgating is a fairly expensive thing, and the people who come are often alumni, so they might be people who are willing to donate to the programs going forwards.
Thank you.
I thought you guys did a nice job of thinking about the various stakeholders and the people that you can combine with, as well as looking at some sort of continuing with an existing practice or building on an existing practice, which sort of helps the feasibility. Financially, we've had some questions about the cups, but broadly, like how long does it take to pay back? Is it going to cost me X amount of dollars? Am I going to break even at some point? You mentioned profit at some point, which as a stakeholder, that perked my ears up. So what do you think overall financially? Like what's the financial hit to BC to make this happen?
Yeah, so I can just speak briefly on it. I think given the nature of our project and it being touching on a couple different bases, we don't have like financials for you. I think what we do have is ways to go about these next steps. So we've identified these feasible solutions that are doable, like you said, given constraints on campus. And so I think in terms of next steps, it's those sorts of conversations. And I think some are easier to make profit or break even, as you said, than others. I think especially the ones where there can be partnerships with Coca-Cola, with Save That Stuff, like those are the potential money makers because you're bringing in outside funding. So in terms of break even and profit, which we mentioned a couple times, at least trying to understand that the ideas have to meet those goals. I think talking with those companies and maybe pushing those sponsorships as some of the first solutions that actually happen can expedite the money-making process, if that makes sense.
It's also pretty important to note that BC already is spending money to buy cups for the drinks or to buy hot dogs. And it's not like we would be introducing an entirely new line of cups, for example. It would just be a replacement to that marginal cost. Shouldn't be that much more, especially for the general reward that we talk about later of of having the sustainable marketing and having an overall sustainable school.
All right. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for reminder that we'll be announcing the winner at 1 o'clock, so if you're available, please come back to that.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for your time.
Varsity sports games at Boston College are a joyous occasion where the entire BC community rallies together for the sole purpose of seeing the Eagles win. But this comes at an environmental cost that is being harder and harder to ignore every day. Hi, my name is Aditya.
I'm Joseph.
And I'm Eric. And today we will address the main environmental issues that we see at these game days and how they can be fixed. We're primarily focusing on football games, which are the largest and most popular sport on campus by far. And we see that these games have rampant food wastage, a low awareness of recycling, and high pollution in the air, which we plan to address by reducing inventory mismatches and unsold food at games, as well as building a more sustainable campus culture, and lastly, by offsetting the emissions we produce.
So the first issue is food waste at game days and football games. So from our research, over the past 10 years, most of the food waste has been going to landfills. And at BC, there's two main groups of people that are contributing to this. The first group are the actual visitors of the game days. These can include students, parents, friends, and alumni. And the second group is the actual food vendors inside Conte Forum and Alumni Stadium. Now, I want to focus on the second group, the food vendors, because they account for approximately 86% of all the food waste produced at BC. Now, there's three main reasons why this food waste is being created by the vendors. The first one is a lack of infrastructure. So for example, Conte Forum, they only have one medium-sized cooler or freezer, and that can be a problem because when game day comes around, they don't necessarily have all the necessary space to preserve food before it's sent out, and that can lead to spoilage problems and increased food waste. The second one is a lack of a registry. So at the end of the night, if they have leftover food that they haven't sold, they actually can't just create a promotion to sell the food out like a 2-for-1 deal. They need permission from a supervisor, and that can also increase food waste. And the final one is a discrepancy between supply and demand for the food sold and the food produced. And that leads us to our potential solution, which is WeanPath. So WeanPath is a technology that basically allows vendors and dining services to weigh the food that is going out. And the whole idea is to use historical data from previous weeks, months, years to try and predict the amount of food demand that's going to come in the future. And what makes WeanPath unique is that it's one of the only services that allows dining services to realize their substantial reductions in food costs before the food is actually sent out, whereas other services are only focused on sending the food to the right places after the food has actually been produced. So for example, they use both quantitative and visual data. So if someone is sending back some asparagus stems, for example, instead of just throwing it out, they'll look at the visual data, they'll weigh it quantitatively so they know how much is left, and then they can say, let's take this asparagus stems and turn it into a cream of asparagus soup, for example, for the next week. So ultimately this leads to less mismatch and more profit because you're minimizing the discrepancy between the supply and the demand.
So the second step to our initiative addresses recycling awareness, focusing on the diversion rate and raising awareness on campus. Zero waste game days require students to know how to properly recycle, but not all students know that on campus. That is why we'd like to introduce some more education. And secondly, we'd also like to address the issue of tailgating and their waste on campus. And we'd like to introduce a fun incentive, which is a $1,000 football throw, which I'll explain later on. And finally, we'd also like to increase for the diversion rate from 39.8%, which is the first diversion rate of our football game last year, 2022, to 63.3%. And 63.3% is the average diversion rate of Seattle University, a brother Jesuit university that also works towards zero waste game days. And finally, we'd also like to implement more transparency within our green policy implementation because students want to know how to help but do not know what BC's initiatives or goals are. This is just a brief chart of the diversion rates of the football games for last season. BC averaged about a 35 to 40% diversion rate, and to increase this, we'd like to lower the waste while also increasing the recyclable amounts. And our solution is threefold, starting with an education module. An education module will build a culture of sustainability while also giving the students the necessary information to know what BC is implementing on campus. Finally, we'd like to introduce a $1,000 football throw, which I'll explain later on. This is just a fun incentive to get tailgaters on board with this sustainability. And finally, we'd like to give more opportunities and volunteering by partnering with BC clubs like Eagles for Equality and the Student Athlete Advisory Committee to just give students more avenues to practice sustainable things. The education module is similar to something that BC does currently. BC mandates their freshmen to take modules on diversity and alcohol. Similarly, we'd like to teach BC students, especially freshmen, to know how to properly recycle, how to reduce waste in the dining halls, and other practical things they can use for the rest of their 4 years at BC. This will ultimately raise that culture of sustainability and create more transparency by allowing students to know what BC is currently doing, which they are currently divesting from fossil fuels and implementing more sustainable buildings. Now, the second initiative is kind of a fun one. So we'd like to get tailgaters on board with our sustainable plan. And banning alcohol is just not the reasonable or right answer. So we'd like to create a little area in the lawn outside of Conti where tailgaters can bring in 20 bottles, plastic containers, you name it, and they have the chance to throw a football into a green recycling bin. If they make it, that's $1,000. Easy as that. Now you may be wondering, is this financially feasible for BC? Well, according to Forbes, it cost about $500 for a roll-off dumpster, which BC already uses. Finally, moreover, if about 500 people attempt this per game day and about 2 people win, this will be a net cost of $1,000, which is negligible for the amount of buzz and the amount of support people will get for sustainable practices. Finally, we'd like to give more opportunities for volunteering for students. This would be in the form of students actively going in the stands asking for waste or recyclables. This is similar to hot dog vendors at baseball games meet demand with their supply. And this will allow students to not only enjoy their game, but also practice sustainability while they watch the football games. This will increase the the weight of recyclables while also decreasing the waste due to cross-contamination that BC students don't really care to think about as they are watching the games.
Finally, we must address the issue of air pollution at football games. So air pollution is a natural byproduct of such a high volume event due to the high density of emissions that are being concentrated at such events. And these are primarily coming from cars idling in traffic as well as barbecue grills at tailgates. And this sees elevated levels of carbon dioxide and particulate matter lingering for hours after the end of such football games. So we propose the implementation of emissions-based fees being charged towards the main emitters at football games. So this would see the collection of the fees, and the resulting price increase means that lesser people will want to park on campus and emit on campus, therefore reducing the density of emissions produced. We would also invest these fees into renewable energy sources, with the idea being that the carbon dioxide emissions saved by generating energy via renewables instead of fossil fuels would offset the emissions generated on campus. So this would see the implementation of a fee added to parking tickets as well as the requirement to buy permits to grill on campus. And this is a form of Pigouvian tax where, for example, people aren't just paying for the right to park on campus on game days, but they're also paying for the environmental harm that they are causing by parking on campus. And this increase in price results in lesser people wanting to emit on campus, reducing the concentration of emissions, while the fact that the price does increase means that the marginal profit loss is minimal as well. And this Pigouvian system is especially effective here because firstly, if you're a fan at BC football games, you're likely not going to have too much of a drop in demand because of a small increase in price. While this also does not disproportionately affect one area of the population compared to another. This also has several perks, such as the possibility of only issuing a specific amount of permits in order to limit emissions to a certain level, while also being adaptable to high-scale scenarios. It also fits great with the recent initiative of divesting from fossil fuels at BC. That's being prevalent in recent years. So how is this financially feasible? Firstly, we estimated that around 105 tons of carbon dioxide is being emitted every season at football games. And essentially this requires 790.47 megawatt hours of renewable generation to offset, which comes to an effective annual cost of $142,284.60, which comes down to around $3.89 per car every game and $1.18 per grill every game, which is in that Goldilocks zone of not being prohibitive but also keeping the consumer behavior effectively.
So now that we've introduced all of our potential initiatives, one of the challenges of something like this is that you have to require permission from so many different departments, including athletic directors, the Sustainability Club, and most importantly, the stakeholders of the university. So even though there are many different groups of people that comprise of the stakeholders, including alumni, Boston College administration, faculty, athletic directors, and the students themselves, they all have one common purpose, and that is to sustain, to deepen, and to build upon the Jesuit brand of Boston College at the university itself and after they go off into the real world. And in 2015, Father Leon, he issued a papal encyclopedia called Laudato Si, in which he argues that students and people around the world need to work together in a swift, unified way to protect the common land that we live on. He argues that we have to help the environment and work together to decrease consumerism. And so in other Jesuit universities across the country, such as Seattle University, they have a zero waste program in which students can participate in activities that allow themselves to visualize the recycling and the environmental impacts of their actions. Similarly, in another Jesuit institution, Loyola University Chicago, the Dean of the School of Sustainability and Environmental Science recently issued a recycling module to allow students to sort of understand the environment that they're coming into as they enter as freshmen. So with all the Jesuit institutions having a common purpose and goal, it encourages Boston College administration and the board of directors here to follow in their footsteps, since once again all Jesuit institutions have a common purpose and a common goal.
Here are just a few sources. Yeah, let's be clean.
All right, we have about 5 minutes for questions.
Yeah, I have a question about the proposal that you guys made around kind of the parking tax. Did you have an opportunity to connect with members at the Flynn Fund around this, the feasibility of this proposal? Because my memory would tell me that my parking spot is not paid for. It is a gift from the university to me as a for my donation, but it is not a paid parking spot. So is there any concern that you guys have about effectively putting on a tax that's a gift from the school?
Sure, so we were just thinking firstly, from the fact that the Flynn Fund at its essence is a donation towards fostering a better student athlete and athletics culture, not culture, but
I would say culture.
Yeah, on campus. We feel that firstly making this culture more green would be an effective way of of creating a new generation of athletes who also consider the planet to be part of their values. At the same time, we feel that essentially the Flynn Fund, we feel that essentially these taxes would be small enough to not pose a significant impact on such parking spaces, in the fact that they might, to an extent, reduce the number of people who want to park there, for example.
So is it effectively a tax on the Flynn Fund or on the Parker?
We are going towards the Parker.
Okay.
So I have a question about the lead path to measure food waste at the events, and it's a scale, and it records, what's the weight of the food waste that's going into either compost or to the trash. So imagining at the venue, who's going to be measuring that waste, and I'm sort of thinking a lot of that goes into the trash can, like the leftover hamburger, hot dogs, it's just thrown out. So how do you collect all of that and measure your food waste with this system?
So the system is primarily used by BC Dining Services, right? Because they're the ones who are producing the food. And the purpose of Lean Waste or Lean Path is more to measure the food that is unsold that has still stuck with the vendors at the end of the game days. So it's not about collecting the food, that's more about the recycling that Joseph mentioned. This is more about the actual supply and the production of food by the dining services and the vendors. And so let's say so I said that like, as a clarification, they measure like the amount of weight that is produced during like 1 week period or one game day, and then they use that to try to predict future game days or periods of time. So say they measure that like there's 20 pounds of food left at the end of 1 week or one game day, they can use that, and that's the unsold food that has still stuck with the dining services or the vendors. They can use that to like say decrease the amount of food they order from next week by 20 pounds. Did you have a question?
You mentioned using student volunteers to help, through where the fans are sitting, the plastic. How would you recommend attracting those students to work? That's always a challenge.
That's a great question. So there was always the option of making BC pay the minimum wage, but we didn't want to do that. And there are already so many volunteers on campus that don't have avenues to serve besides just going to meeting once every other week. So this would be a great active way for people to volunteer. And it's more of rather than an incentivization, it's more of goodwill that we would emphasize and market this initiative.
Yeah, and additionally, the Boston College Club Sports Committee also has avenues to volunteer in such a way, although they do something that's a cleanup that cleans up after the event instead of cleaning up during the event. So we would also try and transfer those efforts towards more of an active role that happens during rather than after the event.
And then Seattle University also implements where about 5 or 10 students every game day just stand next to trash cans and help people sort out their waste before throwing it away. And that small difference, as you can see, the diversion rate is incredibly high for Seattle University. So we believe that also just 5 or 10 people going through the stands can also make a huge impact on the diversion rate. Yes?
And I blanked. It was a good one. That's what it was. So for forecasting demand with Lean Path, I appreciated your talk of demand curve, supply, and all of that. How do you account for things like weather, the popularity of the competing team? There's a lot of factors.
How the game's going.
Score. There's a lot of factors that impact the overall demand. How do you account for that? Because you have to cook the food before the game even starts.
Yeah, so there certainly are, as you said, many factors, and a lot of that is actually already taken into consideration. The difference between supply and demand, it's never going to be perfect. You can never truly exactly, to the exact number, understand how many people are going to be ordering hot dogs or food. Whether, if it's cold, they might order chili. If it's hot, they might get ice cream or snacks. But we can, we have many different avenues that we can already look at, and we already are looking at, to help us understand, and then we can just simply combine all that and synthesize it with our actual quantitative data to try and best estimate how much we're going to need for the next time.
All right, that's about as much time as we have for questions. Thank you so much.
Hi all, welcome to our presentation. We're Mother Nature's Minions, and we're going to be presenting on game day waste management. So this is our team.
Hi, I'm Veronica Wells. I'm a political science and psychology double major.
I'm Isaac Silver. I'm a biology and environmental studies major.
I'm Grace Shively. I'm an engineering major.
And I'm Meta Christian, and I'm a mathematics major. So today we'll be mostly focusing on the research question, our proposal, and finally moving forward. So our main question is, how can we bring awareness to the waste sorting system on BC game days? One thing that we noticed was that alumni lacks compost bins and little signage on the bins that they do have. Similarly, there are little places to recycle at tailgates. While there are trash cans, there are very little ways to actually do more sustainable efforts overall. Next, there are minimal eco-friendly or sustainable food efforts at game days in terms of the containers that are actually being provided. And finally, there's a lack of participation from the students and attendees in recycling efforts and overall more sustainable efforts at Gamedays. One statistic that you might not know is that 22 million pounds of food waste are produced annually by college campuses, and this is only heightened by Gamedays, which sell lots of food, which is very, very vital.
Okay, so in our research, we delved into 4 different main areas. The first being the current failures. Where does BC's game day waste management fall short of sustainability efforts, and what can we improve? And then we looked at other colleges while answering our research question, particularly Harvard, Northeastern, and University, and other schools in the Boston area, and just looked at what they were doing that we weren't doing and why their statistics may have been better than ours. And then thirdly, we looked at reaching attendees. What way can we more effectively communicate waste management and how important the issue is on Boston College campuses. And then finally, with the past solutions, what were our previous efforts at Gamedays to maybe increase sustainability, and how can we maybe re-implement them or improve them? So one of the big aspects that we looked into was a 2014 Game Day audit at Boston College. And the biggest takeaway from this audit was that nothing was composted at all during Game Days in 2014, which is a huge detriment to Boston College's sustainability efforts. And then you can kind of look at the other statistics, but at the very bottom it says around 220 pounds of waste were generated during each Game Day, which is a huge amount of waste, and none of it was being composted. But considering there's a ton of concessions sold every Game Day, we were wondering why more food wasn't being composted at each Game Day.
Okay, so when looking at our research question, we determined that there are 3 clear and very achievable ways to improve sustainability on Game Days. Firstly, the implementation of composting bins in Alumni Stadium and the increased availability of composting in Conti Forum is crucial and easy. There are already trash and recycling bins located throughout the stadium, and adding in composting bins, in a similar style to what we currently have in the dining halls, is an entirely achievable goal that would significantly reduce BC's carbon footprint. Additionally, providing composting bins around the popular tailgating spots would also be a great improvement to tailgate culture. Tailgates in and of themselves produce extensive levels of waste, a large amount of that waste being food. If tailgates were offered the ability to compost, the amount of food waste that they produce could be used for a good purpose by Save That Stuff instead of contributing to methane emissions in landfills. To continue on the idea of composting, the concessions in our stadiums are not always offered in compostable packaging. Our dining halls already have a high level of compostable materials, from bowls to napkins, and everything in between. By ensuring that our stadiums are consistently using these compostable materials, like our dining halls are, the amount of waste that we send to landfills should be reduced significantly, especially if those attending games understand that their containers are compostable. On that note, the improvement of signage and customer knowledge for our recycling, composting, and trash system is crucial if we want either of these other proposals to make any difference. People attending the games need to know what products they should put in each bin. This can be done by firstly adding small signs at the concession stands, letting customers know what is recyclable, compostable, and what must go in the trash, and secondly, by adding improved signage above the waste bins. This signage will be further explained by one of my colleagues later in our presentation. For now, I'm going to speak a little bit more about composting bins. We already have composting bins in the dining halls, so we know that this is an entirely plausible initiative for BC. Money from concessions or ticket sales could be used for the one-time purchase of the bins to be distributed among the tailgating spots and the 2 stadiums. The level of education, the change that could be made with these bins could be vast as long as there is an appropriate level of education also being provided. As previously mentioned, food that ends up in landfills produces harmful methane emissions. But with the implementation of composting, that food waste could be used for productive purposes, like energy production, by the company Save That Stuff, which BC already works with. World-centric products, as highlighted in these images right here, are a brand that our dining halls already use to provide compostable packaging to students. If the concession stands completely implemented these products into their packaging process and made sure to clearly inform customers that their packages are compostable, the stadiums could easily reduce waste and significantly reduce waste by making the container by making the containers clearly compostable, people would not have to scrape their food out of the containers to compost it and then throw out the containers separately. They could throw both the container and the food into the compost, saving game attendees the trouble of sorting out all their waste manually.
Alright, so another issue that we want to improve is the waste system signage. Currently, the signage in the dining halls consists of really large, busy posters, which are ineffective in communicating to students where each waste should go and what bin. So the main reason why students do not sort their trash correctly is a lack of communication and education due to this ineffective signage. And most importantly, and perhaps surprisingly, there is actually little to no signage in Conti and alumni at all. So our proposal to this solution is to create a physical waste display called a shadow box, which would sit on top of the bins. It would look similar to this prototype, as well as this image from the University of San Francisco. It would use real waste items straight from Conti and alumni concession stands to make it extremely clear whether each item belongs in the trash, recycling, or compost, therefore reducing the amount of waste that ends up in the garbage. Here's some other examples that were some inspirations from other schools of shadow boxes that we used for our design. Alright, and so moving forward with this plan, there's going to be a few resources that we need and next steps that we want to take. So a few resources that we will need. First, we're going to need an additional Save That Stuff pickup location added near Conti and alumni. Unfortunately, Save That Stuff requires a site visit before providing a cost estimate for adding a stop, so we were unable to properly determine the cost of an additional stop. With that being said, Save That Stuff already collects waste from our campus at multiple locations, so we imagine that adding one more stop would not increase the cost drastically, if at all. Secondly, we're going to need to add recycling and compost bins in the parking lots and garages to specifically recycle the many bottles and cans at tailgates. And then finally, we would need to order compostable cups and trays for the concession stands. However, as we mentioned before, this should not be a major difficulty as we already have the same products from World Centric in our dining halls currently. Okay, and then looking at the future and implementing our idea, there's a few ways that we think that the transition would be more seamless. The first being educating attendees of the new sorting system through the announcements that are given during games. There's already announcements given during football games, for example, throughout the game, and we think it would be very helpful if we could implement just one or two announcements throughout the course of the game that could maybe educate the attendees about the importance of waste management and throwing out their trash. And then secondly, Boston College Instagram already posts lots of skits using Baldwin, our mascot, and I would say the majority of students at the school do follow the Instagram, and it would be helpful to see maybe Baldwin doing a skit about sustainability or the importance of waste management, because it's not an issue that's brought to light very often on campus. And then thirdly, keeping the products in the shadow box is consistent with the food being sold. So the whole point of the shadow boxes is that you can match up your item that you're using directly with what's above the trash or recycling and compost bins. So we would have to make sure that every time there's a game day that the products that are in the shadow box would have to be identical to the products that are being sold at concessions. But because concessions rarely ever changes at BC, it would be pretty simple to have the same packaging and the same cups like always in the shadow boxes. But if it did change with drinks, it's pretty easy to switch out one of the products that's in the shadow box. And then finally, implementing a three-way sorting system throughout both arenas. It would be obviously helpful to implement in one arena, but right now we only have some composting bins in Conti and none in alumni, and we just think it would be helpful to keep it consistent between both arenas at all times.
All this is to say that the efforts for this proposal will only be as effective as the education that is put into it, and as well as how much the students, faculty, and attendees actually care about the issue. Thank you.
Okay, we'll take 2 to 3 questions and then we'll be good.
The existing cups for concessions and also what's in the dining halls, did you know what the price difference was?
Between the dining halls and the cups?
And the current concession cups and the proposal to go to composite with those, with
I'm
everything?
not 100% sure what the price difference, but we did look on World Centric's website and the bulk order prices, and I think it's like adding maybe the same amount to like Conti or alumni would be equivalent to adding like another MAC price because we use the cups in MAC so often because it's a freshman dorm. And since there are such not few game days, but not as often as we're going to we go to MAC every day, but game days are not every day. And I think it would be entirely reasonable to switch out the cups that are currently being used for the compostable cups.
I was interested that you chose shadow boxes instead of posters. Did you do any research on consumer opinion about shadow boxes, and do they actually persuade people more?
Yeah, that's something that we're hoping to do in the future. That was like part of our future goals, to do some work with that. The main goal here is that when talking to a lot of students, we found that it's like the education issue of people really don't know where to put their trash. And so when looking at the posters, you can see the ones in the dining halls are really busy, and they just have like a lot of items on there, and also the items don't always specifically apply to what's in that specific dining hall, so you can't tell exactly where to put your waste. So these, so it was mostly just when talking to students, we found that that was the major issue, so we thought that this would serve the purpose of telling you exactly where to put your items. But for the issue of Conti and alumni, there's actually no posters in general, so this would just be honestly better than nothing.
So another reason why we find that the shadow boxes tend to be more appreciated by students and people who are trying to sort their waste is that the presentation is more dynamic, and by seeing actual products instead of pictures of products, people tend to sort them more correctly. We don't have like specific data on this, but we've talked to some people around. We're in a group called ELP, and we've talked to some people in that, and we found that it just tends to work better for sorting purposes. But we'd love to get more data on that if possible.
Yeah, and also if you look at Lions Hall specifically, all the posters are actually on the bottom. So unless you're looking as soon as you walk up with your food, for example in the dining hall, then you won't necessarily know once you actually get to the bins of what goes in what bin. So having something on top that's dynamic, especially when you're at concessions, maybe you're a little bit out of there, or maybe you just don't exactly think to look when there's crowds of people going up to the bins, then you have something on top that you know how to sort.
All right. Oh,
Can I have one?
yeah, last question.
So you talk a lot about the composting and the food waste. What about things like the carbon emissions, things like that? Is that in scope with your solution, or?
Yeah, I think we chose to focus mostly on waste management because it's the most resolvable, and it's kind of like one of the biggest issues we see with the fact that it's inconsistent with the rest of the Boston College campus, considering that dining halls do have composting and alumni and Conti don't. And also, as Veronica mentioned earlier, composting itself helps with the carbon footprint of the school because all of our organic waste will not be going straight to landfills.
Yeah, and also when you're teaching college students how to compost at a relatively young age, then they can carry those practices with them into the future and maybe even start composting in their own households, or also continuing recycling practices that are already in place.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for joining us today, guys. Welcome. We are here to present to you our plan to bring BC Game Days to zero waste. We are the City Council of Boston College.
Hi, my name is Faith Drescher. I'm a sophomore in the Lynch School of Education.
I'm Fran Hodgins. I'm a junior in the Carroll School of Management.
And I'm Charlie Neal. I'm a sophomore engineering major at MCAS.
So just a roadmap of where we're going to head today. We're going to lead with a high-level overview of the recommendation, followed by a little bit of background, what informed our recommendation. Then we'll jump into some stakeholder analysis, and we sort of looked at each stakeholder and their goals. We'll do a deeper review of the plan outline, followed by a quick analysis of some risks, and then we'll wrap it up with a summary.
So our plan is divided into two categories. Our first category is operations, which is going to focus on the more feasible economic side of things, short-term solutions. And then we're going to shift over into culture. How can we change BC behavior in the long term, focusing on psychology and graph theory?
So we chose to focus on kind of the three biggest events, sports events on campus. So football in Alumni Stadium, and then hockey and basketball in Conti Forum. And we talked to Matt Hayes in athletic maintenance. He told us that a typical football game, such as the one you see a picture of here, produces about 2 dumpsters of landfill material and 2 dumpsters of single-stream recycling material. So what we found was really interesting and impactful about this, in addition to what you see here, is that the really fun tailgating experience is very contrasted to what happens with the waste during that's produced there. So in Massachusetts, about 1/3 of the waste in the state is incinerated in incinerators such as these. And there's a very big issue of racial injustice about where that waste is incinerated.
So you see these blue stars are where incinerators are located, and the orange dots are active landfills, and they overlap with low-income communities and communities of color. So we would like to transition to zero waste at our game days. There's a couple different definitions of what that means, but they have kind of an overall theme of we want to reduce waste and also not throw out materials that have potential value. There's a lot of schools that have been doing this for a long time. Ohio State has been doing zero waste game days for 10 years. UVA has done them. And we also wanted to say that it's very much part of BC's mission, as you see at the bottom right corner. Climate change is definitely one of the world's most urgent problems.
So when brainstorming for our proposal, we divided our stakeholders into 4 different categories directly aligned with our goals. First, we have our fans. We want to make sure that fans are still enjoying game days with no additional burden or costs on our sustainability efforts. Then we have game day operations. We want to make sure that we're managing our finite human capital. Then we're looking at BC administration, maintaining that positive BC image amongst students, alumni, and donors. And finally, the environment. We want to make sure that it's flourishing. So we're going to start with operations. Our first is adapting a purchasing strategy with aluminum.
So if you go into Conti or Alumni right now and buy a soda, it comes in a plastic bottle. That's actually relatively recently. Up until 2020, soft drinks were sold from a soda fountain with a paper cup. That's because Alumni is not weatherized, so as the weather gets colder, pipes break, which is less than ideal during a really packed football game. So we talked to Frank Bailey, who was the head of concessions, and he told us that working with Coke, they decided moving to plastic was just more realistic. So that's what happens right now. So our proposal is to switch from plastic to aluminum. Aluminum is very highly recyclable, and especially in New England. New England has a lot of facilities for recycling aluminum, as opposed to glass, which actually has to get shipped out of the region, which is important to note. And then eventually we'd like to switch back to fountain beverages, but as kind of a shorter-term solution, we think aluminum is really the way to go. And we can also use compostable packaging, so paper and these cardboard compostable packages for hot dogs and popcorn and things like that.
So jumping into the next section of operations, looking at updating the waste receptacles to match these new items. For a little bit of background, nothing is allowed inside Alumni Stadium on game days, so everything that's disposed of in Alumni Stadium, in theory, is sold in Alumni Stadium. So in order to match these new streams of recycling, if we're just looking at aluminum and we're just looking at compost, we propose that we would update the waste receptacles in alignment with that. Currently, Matt Hayes, who's head of athletic maintenance and facilities, told us that they actually have staff hand sorting the recycling into single stream recycling and into landfill materials after game days. And that's great, although only about 5 to 6% of plastic waste in the US is ultimately recycled, so this single stream recycling option is kind of a major part in the not truly recyclable nature of BC game days.
Our proposal is to introduce new waste receptacles using more human-centered designs, shapes, and colors. We're going to divide it into compost, aluminum, and liquid and landfill bins. As you can see kind of on the right, where images of exact BC products are going to be at eye level. They're also going to be conveniently located around the stadium. And we're assuming that fans are going to have a little bit of a hard time doing this at first. And so we're going to introduce waste goalies, which are going to directly help fans sort and organize their trash with our partnership with Boston Green Academy. So last week I went down to Boston Green Academy, commuted on the T, and talked to Dr. Dave Kramer. Boston Green Academy is a K-12 school that's already currently partnered with BC through Pulse, and they have the only career and technical education program directly related to environmental science, which means that they already have waste goalies in their lunch program that sign up to help their peers organize their trash. Dave Kramer mentioned that we're going to need some incentives for students to come to BC, which is going to include giving them service hours. They need 40 hours to graduate across 4 years, and then also some fundraising money for their sustainable field trips. This directly ties to our theme of racial justice because BGA has a very diverse population of students, and so this would allow them into more green careers, and also introducing students to a college campus is always impactful in the long run. They also recently hired a new staff member for outside organizations to be that liaison between BC and their school.
Jumping into the last section of this operations side of things, section 1C, we want to promote responsible waste disposal during fan tailgates. I mean, right now, the status quo is fans have a lot of disposable cups, plates, etc. By the end of game days, you kind of just throw it on the ground so you know that someone's going to pick it up. Maybe talk to people who said that the goal is to make it look like it never even happened a couple hours after game day. So we have many people working game day ops and facilities to make sure that that ends up being the case. But our goal is not just promote responsible waste disposal, because that's not a very concrete recommendation. We recommend hiring zero waste interns, using facilities and Office of Sustainability to hire actual BC students to get paid to sort of advise people like you see here on like responsible waste practices, and even maybe pass out landfill and recycling bags to tailgaters on game days.
So moving into the more culture aspect of our recommendations, another problem we have on campus is that there's a lot of student groups that are very excited about working with the environment. The problem is that there's not very much communication between those groups and the administration, and the communication that there is often not framed in the best way. So the example you see on the right here is when a BC student group got in trouble for interacting with the administration in a way that just is not productive. So we talked to Matt Brin, who works at the Princeton Office of Sustainability, and they have a position that is kind of a student administration liaison, and they help students work through their projects in ways that will be successful and work with the administration instead of against them. So we propose hiring this staff member for the Office of Sustainability, and they can also help work with facilities and other groups to make these proposals that we're suggesting actually work out.
Now we're looking at how can we change BC culture in the long term. So we've decided to adapt a behaviorist model of learning. Using psychology, this means that learning is seen through tangible actions. We're going to divide it into two categories, classical conditioning and operant conditioning. Looking at classical conditioning, we notice that BC game days are directly associated with carelessness with waste. This includes stimuli such as alcohol, lack of education, lack of convenience, and unsustainable materials, which leads to being careless with waste and then associating BC game days with that. So we need to counter-condition fans and other groups at BC to have BC game days associated with responsibleness, which includes our education initiative with BGA, convenience, including our zero waste interns, and then sustainable materials with our aluminum proposal, so that BC game days are then automatically associated with responsibleness with waste. We're then going to turn to operant conditioning, which means that we're giving people rewards to have an increase in behavior. We're going to have 3 different proposals. Our first is our Get Caught Recycling program. This is going to have our BGA waste goalies selecting a few random students throughout the game to see if they're practicing our sustainable initiatives that we want to see happening, give them a few free incentives such as t-shirts or food vouchers, and then put them on the video stream because, as when we interviewed Jamie DiLoretto, I hear all the time, food and t-shirts for students.
So the second one of our suggestions is having a sustainable tailgater of the game reward. So similar to inside the stadium, we have waste goalies selecting students. Outside the stadium, you'd have zero waste interns selecting a tailgating group or tailgater who's practicing good waste practices, and they would receive an upgraded tailgate spot for the next game, which is a really big reward. And in addition, we would want to implement this kind of cup of the game idea. So when people buy a tailgating spot, they rolled into that would be these aluminum souvenir cups, which in addition to being very highly recyclable, are also just pretty fun. They're something that I would love to use on a game day and that I might want to take home afterwards. And if fans bring those into the stadium, then they'd get 1 free fountain drink, which further encourages them to use the cups. So all these 3 ideas make use of data supported by math, by graph theory, which says that when you have very interconnected groups, impacting just a few people actually spreads incredibly quickly through the group because it's so interconnected. And oftentimes it's so much faster than you'd expect. So putting a few students on the video board is really, really, really quickly going to influence the rest of the community.
Then jumping into the financial impact of this plan, because we didn't want to have any impact on the fan experience, didn't want to increase costs for them, the BC Game Day operations and BC Athletics would end up bearing the cost of this initiative because there's no meaningful revenue impact. While there's some cost increases, there are also some cost declines. As we mentioned, we really would look forward to getting back to those fountain drinks that we had in years past. And as we talked to Frank Bailey, who's involved in concessions, those fountain drinks are 70 to 80% cheaper than bottled beverages on a per unit basis, which would mean that over time, transitioning back to fountain beverages would actually contribute to declines in cost. In order to develop a budget, though, for this, I decided to take a look at just the operating expenses, so excluding the capital expenditures of Weather as an alumni, which would probably take place as part of a larger initiative, maybe with some other update of Alumni Stadium. Also, new waste receptacles, it's just kind of difficult to put that into an operating budget. And also excluded the prizes for Get Caught Recycling because they're just so small that it wouldn't really make sense to include as part of an operating budget like this one. So you might notice that aluminum cans are a pretty massive increase on a per season basis, $30,000. That's based on a pretty high estimate of 75% of fans purchasing drink during game days. And also remember that this is kind of a band-aid solution towards zero waste. The ultimate goal is to move away from these single-use like plastic, aluminum cans, and then moving toward these fountain drinks, which would generally be in compostable cups, and then that cost would pretty much, it'll disappear after a few years. Also note the price premium from new waste. It's just about like $600 more. That was based on a lot of math that you actually can't see here. Even though the zero waste game days would produce a lot less waste overall, the streams of waste are a bit different. So it would be just aluminum versus single stream recycling. It would be just it would be compost and a little bit of landfill. Those things are all a little bit more expensive in the Boston area than single stream recycling and traditional landfill. So that is why it results in a slight increase overall.
So we wanted to put all of our ideas onto this timeline for you to see kind of all in one place. You can see going down the left here, we have each of our strategies, so adapting the purchase strategies with packaging and weatherizing, updating our waste bins, promoting tailgate recycling, and then our 3 ideas for evolving tailgating culture at the bottom. So for example, if you follow Zero Waste Intern Program, it will be planned by our new faculty member in year 1, implemented for the first time in year 2, and then in year 3 there'd be time for people to make changes and see what worked, what didn't, what do we need to change over time. And that was what came out of a lot of our conversation with Matt Bryn from Princeton. He said that if you implement something, you need a couple years of trial run and changing things for it to really be successful. Another thing I think is really important to note out is that we have kind of these 3 ideas here at the bottom kind of coming later. And the reason for that is for time for things to kind of evolve and also make things really build on each other. So we're not kind of doing everything at once. We're letting things build on each other to create really a culture that can continue into the future.
And so this phased approach was based on a risk analysis we did, because any plan you make and you don't assess the risks and sort of react to that is bound to fail. We decided to evaluate based on capital needs and impact certainty. The beginning of our timeline are things that maybe have less capital need but are sort of in the mid-range of impact certainty. Then as you get later on, the impact certainty is a bit more wide-ranging and the capital needs are higher. So this sort of makes sense so that we don't introduce everything at once and have everything kind of fail. It's sort of a phased approach based on our risk mitigation plan.
So our proposal to have zero waste game days includes operations, our purchasing strategy with aluminum. Then we're going to update our waste receptacles with our partnership with BGA. And finally, promoting that tailgating recycling culture with our zero waste interns at BC. And finally, to have a new sustainable culture at BC, we're going to have a new liaison between students and administration with that new staff member and evolving waste culture with behaviorism practices. We also have enduring benefits that are going to extrapolate into the long term, aligned directly with our stakeholders, alignment with the university mission for addressing our stakeholder of administration, racial justice, addressing our stakeholder of the environment and outside communities, enjoyable sustainability for our stakeholder fans, and finally, feasible new practices for game day operations.
Thank you.
Okay, great job. So we have time for a couple questions, and then, yeah.
So aluminum, are you really just talking about the cups, or were you considering on the soda, the aluminum cans?
Yeah, so we would like to switch to aluminum cans in the stadium, just because we can do that pretty rapidly. Frank Bailey
So then
said
you wouldn't
that.
need the cup.
Well, the cups would be for outside the stadium. That's
Okay.
kind of in the mod line with tailgating.
Yeah.
And then inside the stadium, which is kind of more of a closed loop, then you'd use the cans. So they're kind of operating in different areas.
To follow up on that, have you found any stadiums that have been able to get aluminum cans? Because I know there is a shortage.
Right, no, that is a difficulty. That's something we came across in our conversations with Frank Bailey. So that just kind of goes into, we have a really positive relationship with our supplier Coke at the moment. So we would think that we could maybe leverage that really positive relationship we have with Coke and see if we can maybe put a little bit more pressure on them to introduce these more sustainable things as they're kind of going toward their ESG goals. They even introduced an aluminum Dasani bottle for these type of applications. So I mean, they're thinking about it, we're thinking about it. Maybe in a year or two we could sort of cash in on that partnership.
Yeah.
So I'm very interested in kind of the research and analysis that went back, and I really appreciate the linked appendix that you have. Can you talk a little bit about kind of your sources? I mean, I see you did a number of interviews, and you also have a number of sources. Can you just talk a little bit about kind of the process of the research that you did and how it came to be?
Yeah. So we wanted to make sure that we were talking to people that were actually working at BC, doing game days. So for example, we talked to Jamie DiLoretto, who's here right now, and we talked to other people in facilities, all different areas at BC to make sure that we were getting like actual BC information of what they want to see, what's the biggest challenges, making sure that we're addressing their needs as well. And then we also wanted to go outside to have that partnership with BGA. Dave Kramer seemed really excited. He thought it was a very legitimate thing that I was doing, setting up a partnership with him, which was lovely. So I hope that we can actually implement that in the future. And then also talking to the Princeton representative, because we felt like their model was a good one that could be very similar and extrapolated to BC. And then we also were looking at other schools that have gone zero waste, such as the 12-pack schools, such that you saw on the slide previously, with the Ohio State doing it for over a decade, and has a way bigger stadium than BC. And then also looking at unique things about BC and going online and seeing the different ways, and then using that outline that we were given for the different behaviorism techniques that we ended up implementing to be directly related to BC. So that's kind of how we framed it.
Yeah. In addition, we also all come from different schools at BC. So we have Charlie in engineering, MCAS, then we have Faith Lynch, education, BC, some business. And so we're able to leverage sort of each of our like siloed knowledge and come together to develop a recommendation that sort of spanned across that. So you see Charlie knowing about like New England waste and aluminum, and then Faith knowing about sort of these behaviorist, like psychological things, and me more on the financial side, what's practical, realistic. And so we were able to kind of bring that together and issue a recommendation that took into consideration all those different pieces of the experience.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I really appreciate that research and like the connection on like behavior and thinking kind of holistically about how do you change not just the materials but the way people interact with them. I guess some of my questions are, you mentioned that you want to move towards fountain drinks again, something that had been done in the past, and then using compostable containers for that. Why not just jump right there? Why wait? Because that seems like a cheaper option. Also a change in behavior both in serving as well as how you're receiving that drink. And then I guess the other piece was, I love this cup, it's really cool. You're envisioning tailgaters using this as opposed to like the red plastic classic tailgate cup. That's a huge behavior change, and huge cost. So how do you get those in the hands of a lot of tailgaters out there and then get it properly recycled?
So I can address the first part with how you wanted. Sorry, can you repeat the first part?
So why not just jump right to compostable cups inside the stadium with fountain drinks?
Yeah, so we kind of wanted to put things in a more realistic timeline because it's really tempting to do everything at the same time, but I just think it's not really realistic with how the stadium works. And also when we talked to Frank Bailey, he said they used to have, of concessions, they used to have 2 Coke representatives who would move around the stadium during games and fix things as they broke. And the Coke just doesn't do that now. After COVID, they don't have the manpower. So we think that switching to back to fountain drinks later could come as part of another project where we need to renovate alumni for some other reason, and you kind of tack this on instead of doing a whole big operation just to weatherize parts of alumni. So this is the aluminum cans is kind of more of a short-term thing, because we can do it right now. It's relatively simple compared to a big overhaul of alumni. So.
As you can see here, that's just like the pipes exposed, that's on the Beacon Street side. Then on the Ab side, like the Conti Forum side, none of those pipes are exposed. So as you can see, it would be kind of a major overhaul to make this side weatherize and allow the pipes to not freeze. So that's why it's a little bit further down the road. But if BC wanted to prioritize that, they certainly could do that.
And then in terms for the second part of your question, looking at the cups, as Charlie mentioned, our timeline is going to have more of a long term because that is such a big culture shift. So you need to give people a time to adjust and have new techniques and improving it over time. So that kind of goes to our interview with the Princeton representative, where he said you need to start implementing something and then gather data on it for at least 2 years before it's fully implemented. Tailgaters are going to get the cups because it's rolled into their tailgating spot, is kind of what we said in our proposal. So you're already getting the cups at your tailgate, and then we're not having students purchase them. The tailgaters are going to be purchasing them, rolled into their costs, and then the incentive is to bring your cup into the game so that you're getting a free drink once you're in there. And then over time, that will slowly result in a behavior change.
And also, they're just pretty fun. I was making these in the makerspace the other day, and I got a couple questions. Like, oh, what is that?
Did you ever sell some?
But I mean, you have like I know there's fun artsy posters for game days. You do kind of a similar thing on cups, and that's something that I would totally use. And I've talked to a few friends, and they said they would definitely use it. So I think if you add just a little bit of fun to it, then people will want to instead of being a pain.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Hi everyone, we are the Entrepreneurs for Social Impact Environmental team, and this is our Eagles for Sustainability pitch. I'm Jordan.
I'm Kendall. I'm Victoria. So the program we're proposing is composed of 3 steps that we're going to outline throughout the presentation. Step 1 will be switching to compostables. Step 2 is our Eagles for Sustainability volunteer program. And step 3 is installing a reverse vending machine. So step 1 is switching to compostables. So our idea is to eliminate all non-compostable waste that's produced at the stadium by using BC's existing vendor, which is called World Centric. We spoke to Natalie Sill, our BC dining contact, and even though she wasn't able to disclose a lot of data, she was able to tell us that between the year 2021 and year 2022, BC dining reduced its plastic containers by 77.5% and increased its World Centric containers, which are all compostable, by 9.3%, and it led to a 6% decrease in total paper costs, which they attributed directly to this switch. So we concluded that actually going to compostables would actually be cheaper for the stadium.
So we went through all the food options at both stadiums and categorized them and kind of found an alternative compostable option for each. Through the next couple slides, we've laid out our compostable alternatives and included the price for the total unit and for each individual unit as well. On this slide, you can see we've got a ton of different options. For example, we've got a compostable option for the potato wedges and chicken tenders. On this next slide here, we've got alternatives for popular options such as pizza boxes and popcorn bags as well. And here we thought we could swap our drink options to the compostable cups we're already using on campus. Except here we've got an additional straw-free lid as well. And ultimately we found compostable utensils.
So some of the trash items that we haven't found alternatives for are the candy packaging, the packaged ice cream, and the chip bags, along with the hot dog foil. We thought we would keep the hot dog foil just because that's used for the hot dog toss, like during the games, and it keeps the hot dogs warm, and that's a fan favorite. And so the only already recyclable or compostable items that the stadiums sell are the canned beer and wine, and then the bottled water, and then the compostable napkins. So this is step 2, our Eagles for Sustainability volunteer program. We've devised a student volunteer program to place the recycling, composting, and trash at game day in the correct bins.
So our program logistics, in the short term, we would want to start with a fall semester volunteer program that's centered around football games, since as we all know, this is like the big fish in terms of waste production and the amount of people they attract. And then once this is successful, we want to do a spring semester program centered around hockey and basketball games. So for the football game volunteer program, it would be divided into 2 shifts. First, it would be the in-game zero waste station shift, which would last 4 hours. Their zero waste stations are basically composed of 1 compost bin, 1 recycling, and 1 trash bin, and there would be 20 around alumni, and in total we would have 40 volunteers working them, divided in pairs. So they would basically have to stand there and kind of guide their peers to help them properly compost and recycle all the waste. And then there's a post-game stadium cleanup shift, which would last for like an hour and 15 minutes. Which would basically divide a group of 40 volunteers. It could be the same people or new people or a mix of both, because students, when they sign up, will get the opportunity to sign up for 1 shift or both. And they would be divided into 3 groups: compost, recycling, and trash, and they would be handed like separate bags. And so then they would have to scout through the stands, and kind of the recycling group would just pick up recyclables, the compost would just pick up compost, and then waste the same, and then they would drop off the bags to drop-off location. Because we know that there's not a lot of bins in the stands. And then long-term, quickly, it would be pretty similar in the spring, but since it's in Conti, it would only be 10 zero waste stations because it's way smaller, so we would only require 20 volunteers in 10 pairs, and it would only be 1 shift because games are much shorter. So basically, students would sign up by scanning a QR code, which Kendall will go into later, but it would take them to this this Google form that we devised, and they would have to sign in and just choose 1 football game to sign up for, and then either 1 or both shifts, and then if they want to be partnered up with a friend, they can give us their information as well. And if they want to sign up for multiple games, they would have to fill out this form more than once. So once they do this, they would get to their email, they would receive either 1 or both of these videos, each corresponding to a specific shift. So if they signed up for both, they would get both videos. These would be pretty short, but they would just give them a little intro on like what type of waste is produced at the stadium and where each waste, like what bin each waste goes, just so they can help their peers.
And then just some logistics like meeting point, drop-off point, how many volunteers they're working with, what the zero waste stations look like, where they're set up, and stuff like that. And then after they do this, there would just be a really quick quiz that they have to take, and they would have to get at least 80% right, just to make sure that they're accountable, that they watch the video, and they're actually prepared for to be a volunteer. So as we said, we would have 20 zero waste stations around alumni. This is where we envision that they would be. And I won't go into much detail on this, but we basically did the same thing for the spring program. It would be just, the only big difference is that it would only be one shift. And so they would only get one video sent to them when they signed up for it. And this is where we would place the zero waste stations around Kashi.
So to implement our idea, we first wanted to raise awareness and education on recycling. So we thought to have in-game promotional videos with student athletes kind of sharing recycling stats and encouraging fans to compost and recycle. We thought another in-game promotional video could be played specifically for the Eagles for Sustainability program, which will talk about the zero waste stations, where they are, what can be disposed of where, and kind of encouraging volunteers. We thought these videos could be played in between periods or quarters and kind of during the commercial break. And overall, we thought we would launch our Eagles for Sustainability program for its first year on Parents' Weekend, as students are more likely to be in a clear headspace with parents on campus and kind of more aware of what they're disposing where. But more importantly, it allows lead-up time to promote our program and engage fans and engage volunteers as well. Of course, going on in further years, the program would start with the first home game and continue throughout the season.
So who would run this program? We estimate that BC would have to hire one full staff member to run the program, and they would get to hire 2 part-time students who would work from like 5 to 10 hours a week, get $15 an hour, and they would help run the program, recruit and coordinate volunteers, and supervise game days.
To recruit these volunteers, like Vicki mentioned earlier, we would have a QR code around the stadiums and around campus with the sign-up form. We would also send promotional emails to the BC community and kind of raise advocacy and awareness for the volunteer program, getting people involved. We also had the idea that coaches could require their teams to participate for one shift. We've seen volleyball teams, the volleyball team participate in the basketball games sometimes, like with t-shirt tossers kind of helping out, so we thought this could be doable. We also had the idea that students could get course credit for volunteering with Eagles for Sustainability, and of course this would be professor allowed and allocated. Ultimately, we also thought clubs and club sports could volunteer to get funding from the Office of Student Involvement to raise funds for future events or different goals or kind of ideas they have going on campus. As a whole, with the program, with students volunteering, we thought that when students arrive to volunteer at the meeting point, they'll be required to sign in and specify kind of what credit they're getting, if any, for the program. Then after the game and after their volunteering hours, they'll sign out, and the program supervisor will then take the sign-out sheet and refer back to professors, OSI, coaches to kind of confirm the students' involvement with the program. And here we kind of laid out just some emails students could send to professors or OSI, just to kind of showcase the ease of obtainment for the credits, funds, participation.
So the volunteers will be given pennies to wear at the beginning of their shift, and then they'll return them after, so they'll just place that over their clothes. We've budgeted for about 100 pennies, and the supervisor or the part-time students would wash these in between shifts, and they would say Eagles for Sustainability on the front and volunteer on the back. Obviously this is a t-shirt and we have a penny, but we designed this and made it in the makerspace. And then we've also designed some like funny signs that could possibly be placed around the zero waste stations. These are just suggestions and like some ways to make recycling and composting a little bit more fun and engaging. And so then these are the signs that we want behind the recycling, composting, and trash bins, and each sign includes every single thing that could be placed in each bin. So like the water bottles, the cans, all of the compostable container swaps, and then the trash packaging. This is kind of how we envision a zero waste station. So we would have one volunteer on each side of the set of bins and then the signs behind. So we went to Alumni Stadium and we counted 20 stations of trash and recycling bins. But BC would need 20 additional composting bins or to repurpose the excess trash and recycling bins as composting bins. So these are the materials for the volunteers that have the post-game shift. And so we've allocated for blue recycling bags, green composting bags, compostable food service gloves, and then we have budgeted and found the pennies on custom ink, and all these prices will be at the end on our finance sheet. So these are some examples of other universities that have had really high success rates from having similar volunteer programs implemented as ours. So University of Colorado is a good one to look at since they have a similar stadium size as BC's football stadium. So they achieved 80% of game day waste as recycling or composting. University of Tennessee diverted 66% of game day waste to landfills, and University of Michigan diverted 73% of game day waste to landfills. And then these are some more success stories. So these are big sports schools that might be some of our rivals that also implemented a game day volunteer program to help with the waste and try to go zero waste.
Okay, so our third step is installing a reverse vending machine. This is basically an easy, fun, and efficient way to get students to recycle the only recyclable materials that would be left with our program, which are bottles and cans. So how it works is that students would go up to the machine and they would put in their can or their bottle. The machine would scan it and just make sure it can take it. It does this with a 99% accuracy, which is really good. And then once it swallows it, it would crush, perforate, and sort the bottles. And then it would end up spitting out a receipt that schools can generally customize. It would be able to hold 200 bottles and 900 cans total. And there's a lot of different RVMs out there, but most schools we found that have been successful at this have used the Atlas reverse vending machine, which costs around $10,000. But as I said, there's a lot of alternatives. You could find ones for like $6,000 if you'd like, but we thought we would show this one since it's legitimate and we know that it's been successful in other schools. So a good thing about the Atlas RVM is that it can be customized on the outside, so BC could put its logo on it and kind of like make it more eco-friendly. And then the receipts, as I said before, can be customized, so we propose doing an endgame raffle after every game. So students would be it could be like some kind of BC merch that is given away, and it could be promoted throughout the game. So for example, at halftime, students could be told to like, hey, go to this vending machine, it's right outside of the student section, and recycle as many cans and bottles as you can, and get higher chances of winning the raffle, because every receipt would be a raffle ticket. And so as I said before, we know this is pretty costly, so we would start by just using one and putting it outside the student section. And then as this becomes successful, which we're very confident in, we can invest in more in future years. And these are just some of the schools that have been successful with the Atlas RVM, and just a quote from a very happy Lafayette student. So this is our financial spreadsheet of all of the costs from each swap or change that we want to make to the stadium. So we have all of the prices in bulk with the quantity, and then all of the unit prices. So if we subtract the RVM from the total cost of everything, it only comes out to about $2,000, a little bit over $2,000, which is generally pretty cheap since BC is already paying for all of the containers in the stadiums that are not compostable and not recyclable. And these ones are actually cheaper, so we've also found all of the prices for everything like that. And so then we have thought beyond just the compostable swaps, the volunteer program, and the reverse vending machine into a bigger picture project that BC could take on in the future once our idea has been implemented for some time. So about a week ago, we got a tour of Save That Stuff from Eric Levy, the CEO and founder, and he educated us about the composting and recycling processes that Save That Stuff goes through at the facility, and informed us about the process of going from organic waste to energy that Save That Stuff takes a role in. Eric told us that this organic to energy process has saved other facilities millions of dollars in electric bills while using clean energy produced from food waste. We researched a lot, and we reached out to a lot of different people about this to see if BC would be able to implement something like this. But we found that a lot of the data that we would need to make this our project was not available to us, since BC doesn't keep track of the amount of energy and electricity each building on campus uses, or the amount of food waste produced at dining halls, game days, anything like that. So with our program, we would make it much easier to collect this data, and for BC to possibly be able to implement this in the future. So to bring our pitch to a close, the three main parts of our plan are the compostable container swaps, the Eagles for Sustainability volunteer program, and the reverse vending machine, which are each extremely realistic and affordable for BC to implement.
Our Eagles for Sustainability program also aligns closely with BC's value of men and women for others. We have a strong focus and connection to serving others and working with our greater BC community.
So in conclusion, we strongly believe that by combining our educational and incentive efforts, we can holistically promote proper recycling and composting at BC Game Days, and together work towards achieving a more sustainable campus. And these are just the list of stakeholders that we've been naming throughout the presentation and the contacts that we reached out to make this happen. So thank you for those who are here and the references. Thank you.
so much. Okay, we have a couple minutes for question and answering from the judges.
On the reverse vending machines, that you mentioned that you did some research, so they're being used in a couple other schools, so how many would they have at game day, since it doesn't really take a lot?
Yeah, so other schools that we've looked at, they all pretty much started just with one, just to kind of see how it goes, but as it's become successful, they've increased. I think Lafayette had like maybe 5 around their stadium, but which like I think would be our end goal, but we thought starting with 1 would be a good kind of dipping our toe in the water. And other schools just have them like around their campus, which eventually could expand to that, or like in the dining halls and stuff like that.
One of the things that we try to focus on is lines and throughput of customers, and I really liked how you had the 2 volunteers on either side of the trash stations or the zero waste stations, but are you concerned with that slowing down the process of throwing out the customers' waste, and how would you address getting enough people through in time and not having a backup?
I think so. That's why we decided to do 20 zero waste stations, because as we said, currently in alumni there are 20 like recycling and trash stations, so that's currently kind of how it's set up. And since we would have the volunteers at either side, we think that it would be kind of easy for people to go and recycle. And we just think that just like having someone there standing puts a little pressure, and they would have a lot of very loud signs. So we don't think that would be a problem, just because we did think about the size of alumni, and that's why we ended up deciding with 20 stations.
How easy do you think it would be to recruit these volunteers or interns, and like you all go to the games? Would this be a desirable role as a way to participate in these games?
So that we were thinking about that, because obviously BC is a big football school, so it's not super easy to get people to give up their game days. But that's why we created like all the incentives, like clubs could get funding through OSI for participating. Student athletes could be required to do some volunteer hours, which we know already kind of happens for some teams. And then I feel like the course credit could also incentivize students to do it. But we definitely think it would be a little hard at first. But I think as our volunteer program gains traction and more professors offer it as a possibility, and more clubs find out about it, it would kind of be like a snowball effect. And I think as people see it actually happening, like when you go to a game and you see volunteers on all these stations, I think it would probably incentivize students. We also were thinking, like, even though BC is a big football school, not all the students go to football games. I feel like there's a big chunk of students that don't really care much about them. It's hard to admit, but it's true. So I think there are a lot of like environmental clubs and a lot of students that I feel like would have that free time that wouldn't really be like replacing their game day experience with the volunteer program.
And I also think, especially because we've seen really high success rates from other schools that have implemented volunteer programs during the games that also have 4-hour shifts, an hour shift after the game, similar structure to ours, and they've been able to get the same amount of volunteers as us, if not more, and those are also big sports schools. I think that it would be realistic for us to start to implement that. Obviously, as Vicky said, it would be like a gradual process, but.
To bring myself note, we kind of talked about having 2 people on each station, kind of giving the opportunity that if you wanted to go check out the game for a little bit, someone's still going to be on the station, still going to be there, and kind of can bounce back and forth with it, while still enjoying the overall football experience, but also kind of remaining that environmental focus. Because like Vicky said, we've got a ton of environmental clubs around campus, so we know the interest is there.
All right, I think that's it. Thank you so much.